What happens when a man who has everything discovers he has nothing at all? When Mason Reed, one of America's youngest billionaires, walked into that frozen diner on Christmas Eve, he thought he was just escaping the emptiness of his mansion. He had no idea that a broke single mother counting pennies for her daughter's dinner would shatter every wall he'd built around his heart. This is the story of how one night changed 5 lives forever. A story about loss, second chances, and discovering that the family you choose can heal wounds you thought would never close. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it touches your heart, hit that like button and stick around until the end, because what happens next will remind you why kindness matters more than money ever could. Now, let me take you back to that freezing December night in Chicago, where everything began. The Golden Lantern Diner sat on the corner of Clark and Division like it had been there since the dawn of time, which wasn't far from the truth. 73 years of burnt coffee, linoleum floors worn smooth by shuffling feet, and the persistent smell of bacon grease that no amount of cleaning could ever fully erase. The neon sign outside flickered, had been flickering for at least 5 years, casting intermittent red light across the snow-buried street. Mason Reed pushed through the door at 9:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, letting in a blast of Arctic air that made the 3 other customers, all regulars, all alone, look up with mild irritation before returning to their plates. He wasn't dressed like a billionaire. Dark jeans, worn leather jacket, a gray scarf his late wife had given him 4 Christmases ago. The cashmere was starting to pill at the edges. He kept meaning to replace it. He never did. "Sit anywhere, hun," called the waitress without looking up from the register. Doris. Had to be in her 60s, gray hair and a bun so tight it probably gave her headaches, but her smile was genuine when she finally glanced his way. "Coffee, please." Mason slid into a booth by the window, the vinyl cracking under his weight. Outside, snow fell in thick, lazy flakes that had already buried the parked cars up to their wheel wells. Chicago weather. Brutal and indifferent. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He turned it face down on the table. The coffee arrived in a mug that had seen better decades, a chip in the rim that Mason automatically rotated away from his mouth. Doris lingered. "You okay, sweetheart? You look like you could use more than coffee." "I'm fine." Mm-hmm. She didn't believe him, but she'd worked diners long enough to know when to push and when to leave well enough alone. "Holler if you need anything." Mason wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into his fingers. Through the window, the city looked like a snow globe someone had shaken too hard. Peaceful, if you didn't think too much about all the people out there with nowhere warm to go. His son was at home with his mother-in-law, 7 years old and already learning to navigate the carefully maintained fiction that Daddy was fine, that everything was fine, that the big empty house was exactly where they were supposed to be on Christmas Eve, instead of... He cut that thought off. He'd gotten good at cutting thoughts off. The door chimed. Mason didn't look up, not at first, but there was something about the quality of the silence that followed, the way Doris stopped mid-step, the way the old man at the counter glanced over his shoulder, that made him turn his head. The woman who walked in looked like she'd been fighting a war and losing. Not old, maybe late 20s, but worn in a way that had nothing to do with age. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had given up hours ago, strands falling around a face that might have been beautiful if it wasn't so goddamn exhausted. Her coat was too thin for Chicago winter, and there was duct tape holding one of her boots together. But it was the little girl clutching her hand that made Mason's chest tighten. 5, maybe 6 years old. Blonde curls escaping from under a pink knit hat with a broken pom-pom. The kind of kid who should have been in warm pajamas, waiting for Santa, not trudging through a blizzard at nearly 10 o'clock at night. "Sit down, baby," the woman said softly, steering the child toward a booth near the back. "We'll warm up for a minute." The girl's lips were faintly blue. Doris appeared with menus and that professionally cheerful expression that waitresses perfect over decades. "Evening, what can I get you ladies?" The woman, Mason couldn't hear her name, wasn't close enough, pulled off her gloves with careful, deliberate movements. Her hands were red and chapped. Could we see a menu, please?" "Course, hun. Coffee?" "No, thank you." She opened the menu, and Mason saw her eyes scan the prices with the kind of focus that spoke of mental mathematics, of budgets counted in quarters and dimes. The little girl leaned against her mother's arm, shivering. Mason should have looked away, should have minded his own business. He was good at that, had made an art of it, actually, over the past 3 years. The world was full of sad stories. You couldn't fix them all. You'd go crazy trying. He watched anyway. The woman's purse was one of those cheap canvas things that probably came from a dollar store. She opened it slowly, like she was afraid of what she'd find inside, and began pulling out change. Quarters, dimes, nickels, a few pennies. She counted them twice, her lips moving silently, then closed her eyes for just a second. "Mommy?" The little girl's voice was small. "Can I have the pancakes?" "Yes, baby." "What about you?" "I ate earlier, remember? At Aunt Marie's." The lie came smooth, practiced. Mason recognized it because he'd told versions of it himself. Different circumstances, same desperate attempt to protect a child from harsh truths. The girl accepted this without question, the way kids do when they're too young to understand or too tired to argue. When Doris came back, the woman ordered 1 plate of chocolate chip pancakes and a glass of water. Nothing else. Doris wrote it down without comment, but Mason saw the way her expression tightened, the way she glanced at the pile of coins on the table. The phone in Mason's pocket buzzed again. Liam, probably. His assistant. Checking in, making sure he was okay, because apparently Mason had become the kind of person people checked on. He left it alone. The pancakes arrived faster than they should have. Doris must have told the cook to rush it, and the little girl's face lit up like someone had plugged her into an electrical socket. "Thank you, Mommy." "You're welcome, Sophie." The woman's voice cracked on the name. Sophie. Mason turned the name over in his mind. A good name. His wife would have liked it. He watched the kid eat with the single-minded intensity of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in too long. The mother didn't touch the food. Didn't even look at it. She kept her eyes on her daughter, and the expression on her face was so raw, so full of love and desperation and bone-deep weariness that Mason had to look away. His coffee had gone cold. He signaled Doris for a refill, and when she came over, he kept his voice low. "That woman and her daughter, what's their bill?" Doris glanced over her shoulder, then back at him. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "Just tell me." $6.50 with tax." Mason pulled out his wallet, leather, Italian, worth more than that woman probably made in a week, and extracted 2 20s. "This covers theirs and mine. Whatever's left is yours." "Look, I don't know what you're thinking." "I'm not thinking anything." He met her eyes. "Just do it quietly. Don't tell her it was me." Doris studied him for a long moment, then pocketed the bills. "You're going to make me cry into the meatloaf, and I got 3 hours left on my shift." "You'll survive." She left, and Mason went back to watching the snow. He should leave, should go home to his own kid, to the housekeeper who'd stayed late to make sure Liam wasn't alone on Christmas Eve, to the professionally decorated tree in the living room that looked like something out of a magazine and felt just as sterile. He didn't move. 10 minutes later, Doris returned to the woman's table with the check. Mason couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the moment the woman looked at the bill, saw the way her face went blank with confusion. "There must be a mistake," she said, loud enough for him to catch. "This says 0. "No mistake, Ma." Doris's voice was gentle. "Someone took care of it. Merry Christmas." "Who? I can't accept." "Don't know who, hun. They wanted to stay anonymous." Doris patted her shoulder. "Just accept the kindness, okay? You look like you could use some." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She pressed a hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs she was trying desperately to control in front of her daughter. The little girl, Sophie, looked up with wide, worried eyes. "Mommy, why are you crying?" "Happy tears, baby. Just happy tears." Mason's throat felt tight. He stood up, intending to slip out while they were distracted, but Doris caught his arm as he passed the counter. "That was a good thing you did." "It was $40. Barely qualifies as good. To her it does." Doris squeezed his arm. "You have kids?" "A son, 7. "He's lucky." Mason didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He pushed out into the snow, into air so cold it burned his lungs, and made it maybe 10 steps before he stopped. The woman and her daughter were still inside. Through the frosted window, he could see them gathering their things, what few things they had. The woman helping Sophie into that inadequate coat, adjusting her hat, movement slow and careful like someone running on fumes. Where were they going? It was Christmas Eve, nearly 10:30, and the temperature was dropping into the single digits. "Not your problem," a voice in his head said. It sounded like his father. "You can't save everyone." He'd been telling himself that for 3 years. It had never gotten easier to believe. The diner door opened. The woman emerged with Sophie clutched close to her side, both of them bracing against the wind. They turned left, heading north, and Mason stood there like an idiot watching them disappear into the snow. Then he was moving. "Hey!" His voice came out rougher than intended. They both turned, the woman instinctively pulling her daughter behind her with a wariness that spoke of hard experience. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm not." He stopped, took a breath. "My name is Mason. I was in the diner. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. It's dangerous out here." The woman's jaw tightened. "We're fine." It's 10:30 on Christmas Eve, and the wind chill is below zero. "I said we're fine." But her voice wavered, and she was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Sophie peered around her mother's legs. "Are you the man who bought us dinner?" "Damn." "Sophie, how did you know her name?" The woman's voice went sharp with fear. She took a step back, pulling Sophie with her. "I heard you say it. In the diner. Look, I'm just trying to help." "We don't need help." "Yes, you do." The words came out before he could stop them, blunt and absolute. "I'm sorry, but you clearly do." "Where are you staying tonight?" "That's none of your business." "You're right. It's not. But I'm making it my business because that little girl is freezing and you don't have anywhere to go." He saw the flash of recognition in her eyes, the acknowledgement that he'd guessed correctly, before she shuddered it away. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." "Why?" The question was almost a challenge. "Why do you care?" Mason looked at Sophie, at this kid who was probably the same age his son had been when her mother died, and something in his chest cracked open. Because someone should. The silence stretched. Snow accumulated on their shoulders, their hair. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. "We're staying at a shelter," the woman finally said, "on Franklin Street. The one on Franklin closed last month, budget cuts." Her face went white. "What?" "It closed. I donated to the organization. They sent a letter explaining why." He watched her process this, watched the last bit of color drain from her cheeks. "You didn't know?" "We've been..." She swallowed hard. "We've been in Milwaukee. We just got back today. I thought the website said..." "Where's your car?" "Don't have one anymore." "Family?" "No." "Friends?" She just looked at him, and the answer was written all over her face. Mason pulled out his phone. "I'm calling you a car. There's a hotel 3 blocks from here, the Whitmore. I'm getting you a room for the night." "I can't afford..." "I'm paying." "No." Her voice turned fierce. "I don't take charity." "It's not charity. It's Christmas." He was already pulling up the car service app. "Please, just for tonight. You can't take that kid out in this weather with nowhere to go." "I'll figure something out." "How?" "Every shelter in the area is full. I know because I fund half of them." He looked up from his phone. "Let me do this. Just tonight. Then tomorrow you can tell me to go to hell if you want. But tonight, let me make sure you're both safe and warm." She was crying again, silently, tears freezing on her cheeks. Sophie had pressed her face against her mother's coat, small body trembling. "Why are you doing this?" The woman's voice was barely a whisper. "Because my son is at home right now, warm and safe, and he's your daughter's age, and I can't..." Mason stopped, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. "I can't walk away knowing she's out here. I just can't." The woman closed her eyes, opened them. One night," Mason agreed, even though he was already planning for more. "The car will be here in 3 minutes. Come on." They stood under the diner's awning, 3 strangers huddled against the cold. Mason could feel the woman watching him with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. Sophie had stopped shivering quite so hard, now that they were out of the wind. "I'm Elena," the woman finally said. "Elena Hart. And this is Sophie." Mason Reed. He saw recognition flicker in her eyes. His name was on buildings, in newspapers, but she didn't comment. It's nice to meet you both. The car pulled up, a black sedan with heated seats and a driver who took one look at Sophie's blue lips and cranked the heat without being asked. Mason opened the door, helped them inside, then leaned down to speak to the driver. "The Whitmore Hotel. I'll send the booking confirmation to your phone." He pulled out his wallet again, extracted $500 bills, and pressed them into Elena's hand before she could protest. "For food, clothes, whatever you need." "I can't." "Yes, you can." He closed her fingers around the money. "Merry Christmas, Elena." He shut the door before she could argue further, watched the car pull away into the snow. Stood there until the taillights disappeared, feeling something shift in his chest. A weight he'd been carrying so long, he'd forgotten it was there, suddenly lighter. His phone rang. This time he answered. "Mason, where are you?" His mother-in-law, Catherine. "Liam's asking for you." "I'm on my way. Tell him 10 minutes. "Is everything okay? You sound—" "I'm fine, Catherine. Just ran into something unexpected." "On Christmas Eve in a blizzard?" "What kind of something?" Mason looked back at the Golden Lantern Diner, at the flickering neon sign that had drawn him in off the street. "The kind that reminds you why we're supposed to be kind to each other." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Your wife would be proud of you." The words hit harder than they should have. "I'll be home soon." He ended the call and started walking toward where he'd left his car. But he couldn't shake the image of Elena's face, the exhaustion, the fear, the fierce protective love. Couldn't stop thinking about Sophie's blue lips and that broken pom-pom on her hat. One night wasn't going to be enough. He'd known that the moment he'd opened his mouth, the moment he'd made it his business. One night wouldn't fix whatever had put them in that position, wouldn't give Elena her husband back, wouldn't restore whatever life they'd lost. But it was a start. Mason pulled out his phone again as he reached his Mercedes, brushing snow off the windshield with his free hand. Found Liam's number in his favorites. "Boss? Everything okay? I need you to do something for me, tomorrow, first thing." "It's Christmas." "I know. I'll pay you triple time." Liam sighed. "What do you need?" "There's a woman named Elena Hart. She's going to be at the Whitmore Hotel. I need you to find out everything you can about her situation, why she's homeless, what happened to her husband, what she needs. And I need you to schedule her for an interview the day after Christmas." "Interview for what?" "Whatever job she's qualified for. Find out her background and create a position if you have to. Something with benefits, something stable." "Mason, you can't just hire random people off the street." "I can if they work for me." He climbed into the car, turned the heat on high. "And I need you to extend the hotel booking, a week minimum. Send up clothes for both of them, toiletries, food, everything they might need. Charge it to my personal account." "How old's the kid?" 5 or 6, blonde, pink hat. He could hear Liam typing. "You're going soft. Don't push it. You know the board's going to have opinions about this kind of spending." "The board doesn't get opinions about how I spend my own money." Mason put the car in gear, pulled out into the empty street. "Just do it, Liam. Please." Yeah, okay." More typing. "For what it's worth, this is a good thing you're doing." Mason thought about Elena counting change for pancakes she wouldn't eat, about the way her hands shook when she'd tried to refuse his help. "We'll see." The drive home took 20 minutes through snow-clogged streets. His house was in Lincoln Park. 3 stories of meticulously restored brick, 12 rooms, more space than 2 people could ever need. The Christmas lights were on, white and tasteful, professionally installed. They'd run him 15 grand. Elena probably couldn't have scraped together $15. Catherine met him at the door, still in her coat. "Liam's finally asleep. He waited up as long as he could." "I'm sorry, I got held up." "So I gathered." She studied his face. "You want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Mason, I met someone tonight. A woman with a daughter. They needed help." He shrugged off his jacket, hung it in the closet next to a dozen others. "I helped them." "And?" "And nothing. That's it." Catherine's expression softened. Sarah would have done the same thing. His wife's name still hurt, even after 3 years. "I know. You're a good man. I hope you know that." "I'm working on it." He headed for the stairs. "Thanks for staying with Liam." "Of course. He's my grandson." She paused. "Will you be here for Christmas dinner tomorrow?" wouldn't miss it. He climbed the stairs to his son's room, eased the door open. Liam was sprawled across his bed, covers kicked off, looking so much like Sarah it made Mason's chest ache. 7 years old and already learning to hide his sadness behind smiles, to pretend the hole his mother left wasn't still raw and bleeding. Mason pulled the covers up, kissed his son's forehead. "Love you, buddy." Liam stirred but didn't wake. In his own room, Mason stood at the window and looked out at the snow-covered city. Somewhere out there, Elena and Sophie were checking into a warm hotel room. Somewhere, they were safe. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. He pulled out his phone, sent a text to Liam. "Add a Christmas tree to the delivery tomorrow. Decorations, presents for a 6-year-old girl. Make it special." The response came back immediately. "You're definitely going soft." Mason smiled despite himself. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. He thought about calling the hotel, checking to make sure they'd arrived safely, but that felt like overstepping. Elena had made it clear she didn't want charity. Didn't want to be watched over like some kind of project. He'd have to tread carefully if he wanted to actually help, instead of just making himself feel better. His phone buzzed with an email notification. The hotel confirmation. Elena and Sophie Hart checked in, room 412. 4 floors up, away from the street noise. Good. Then another email, this one from the booking. Additional charges authorized for room service, gift shop. Elena was using the money he'd given her. Smart. Get what they needed while they had the chance. Mason set an alarm for 6 a.m. He'd go to the hotel in the morning, bring breakfast, make sure they were okay. Then he'd figure out the rest. Outside, the snow had stopped. The city lay quiet under its white blanket, peaceful and cold and full of people fighting battles nobody else could see. For the first time in 3 years, Mason Reed went to sleep on Christmas Eve, feeling like maybe, just maybe, he'd done something that mattered. In a hotel room 4 miles away, Elena Hart sat on the edge of a bed softer than anything she'd slept on in 6 months and watched her daughter sleep under clean white sheets. The heating worked. The shower had hot water. There was food in the mini-fridge and clean clothes coming in the morning, courtesy of a stranger who'd seen her at her lowest and chosen kindness instead of judgment. She should have been relieved, should have been grateful. Instead, she was terrified, because kindness always came with a price, and she'd learned the hard way that accepting help meant giving up control, meant owing someone, meant making yourself vulnerable to disappointment and betrayal and all the ways people could hurt you when you let them get close. But Sophie was warm. Sophie was safe. Sophie had fallen asleep with a full stomach and a smile on her face, and Elena would walk through fire for that. Even if it meant trusting a billionaire she'd met in a diner. Even if it meant letting someone see how broken she really was. She looked at the stack of $100 bills on the nightstand, more money than she'd seen in months, and made herself a promise. She would accept this help, just for tonight. Would let Sophie have one good Christmas. Then tomorrow, she'd thank Mason Reed, return whatever money they hadn't spent, and figure out a way forward that didn't involve handouts from strangers. She'd been taking care of herself and Sophie since Marcus died. She could keep doing it. She had to. Outside the window, Chicago sparkled under its coat of snow, a million lights burning against the darkness. Somewhere out there, a man who'd lost his wife was lying awake thinking about kindness and second chances, and the way grief could hollow you out until you forgot what it felt like to be whole. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives had just collided in a way that would change everything. Neither of them knew that one night of kindness would turn into something neither of them expected and both of them desperately needed. Neither of them knew that the family they'd both lost was about to be rebuilt, piece by broken piece, into something new. But they'd find out, starting tomorrow. Starting with Christmas morning. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she didn't remember closing. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. The mattress was too soft, the sheets too clean, the silence too complete. Then it came back in a rush. The diner, the stranger, the car ride through the snow. The hotel room that felt like stepping into someone else's life. Sophie was still asleep beside her, curled into a tight ball the way she always did, thumb halfway to her mouth. Elena had been trying to break that habit for months, but lately she'd stopped fighting it. The kid needed whatever comfort she could get. The clock on the nightstand read 7:23 a.m., Christmas morning, the first one without Marcus. Elena's throat tightened. She pushed herself up, careful not to wake Sophie, and padded to the window. 4 stories below, the streets were empty except for a few early risers walking dogs. The snow had stopped sometime in the night, leaving everything covered in white that would turn to gray slush by afternoon. Chicago didn't stay pretty for long. Her phone, the cheap prepaid one with the cracked screen, showed 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize and 1 text message. "This is Liam Chen, assistant to Mason Reed. A delivery will arrive at your room at 9 a.m. Please accept it with Mr. Reed's compliments. Merry Christmas." Elena stared at the message. She should have felt grateful, should have felt relieved that someone was helping without asking for anything in return. Instead, she felt that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. This was too much, too fast. Men didn't just hand out money in hotel rooms and Christmas deliveries unless they wanted something. Marcus had been different. Marcus had been good. But Marcus was dead, and Elena had learned the hard way that not everyone who smiled at you had good intentions. She was still holding the phone when Sophie stirred. "Mommy?" "Right here, baby." Sophie sat up, rubbing her eyes, then looked around the room with dawning wonder. "We're still here. I thought I dreamed it." "No dream. We're really here." "Can we stay?" The question hit harder than it should have. "Just for a little while." "How long?" "I don't know yet." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, brushed hair out of Sophie's face. "But today is Christmas, so let's not worry about tomorrow, okay?" Sophie's face lit up in a way Elena hadn't seen in months. "It's Christmas. I forgot it was Christmas." "I know, sweetie." "Do you think Santa knows we're here?" Elena's chest ached. She and Marcus had always gone overboard with Christmas. The tree, the presents, the stocking stuffed with candy and small toys. Last year, Sophie had gotten a bike with training wheels and a doll that said 15 different phrases. This year, Elena had managed to scrape together enough for a coloring book and a pack of crayons. And even those were still sitting in the motel room they'd been kicked out of 2 days ago. "I think Santa is very busy on Christmas," Elena said carefully, "but I bet he's thinking about you." Sophie seemed to accept this, which was a small mercy. "Can we have breakfast?" "Absolutely. Let's see what we can find." The room service menu was leather-bound and extensive. Elena looked at the prices and felt sick. $18 for eggs, $22 for pancakes. She still had most of the money Mason had given her, but spending it on overpriced hotel food felt wrong when they could walk to a convenience store and get cereal for $3. She was trying to figure out the math when someone knocked on the door. Elena froze. "Stay here, baby." She checked the peephole, hotel security training from a job she'd had 5 years ago, back when life made sense. A young Asian man in an expensive suit stood in the hallway next to a rolling cart piled high with boxes and bags. He saw her shadow at the peephole and held up an ID badge. "Ms. Hart? I'm Liam Chen. We texted earlier." Elena opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. "It's barely 8 o'clock." "I know. I'm sorry. Mr. Reed wanted to make sure you had everything you needed for Christmas morning." Liam gestured to the cart. "May I bring these in?" Elena looked at the pile of packages, at this man who'd probably rather be home with his own family, and felt that anxiety spike again. "This is too much." "Mr. Reed disagrees." Liam's smile was polite but firm. "Please, it'll just take a minute." Against her better judgment, Elena opened the door. Liam wheeled the cart inside with practiced efficiency, began unloading boxes onto the dresser and table. Clothes. Women's sizes and various styles, still tagged. Children's clothes in pinks and purples. Toiletries. A bag from a toy store that made Sophie's eyes go wide. "There's also breakfast," Liam said, uncovering dishes on the bottom shelf of the cart. "Hot chocolate, pancakes, eggs, bacon, fruit." Mr. Reed wasn't sure what you liked, so he ordered variety. The smell hit Elena all at once. Real food, hot and fresh, and her stomach clenched with hunger she'd been ignoring for days. Sophie made a small sound of longing. We can't accept all this." "With respect, ma'am, you already did when you checked in last night." Liam finished unloading, straightened up. "Mr. Reed will be here around 10, if that's acceptable. He wanted to check in, make sure you're settled." "Why is he doing this?" The question came out sharper than Elena intended. "What does he want?" Liam's expression softened slightly. "He wants to help, that's all. I've worked for him for 3 years, and I can tell you he's not..." He's one of the good ones, Ms. Hart. He doesn't have ulterior motives. He just saw someone who needed help and decided to provide it. People don't just do that. Mason Reed does. Liam handed her a business card. Simple, elegant, just a name and phone number. If you need anything before he arrives, call me. The hotel knows to charge everything to his account. Meals, laundry, anything in the gift shop. Don't hesitate. He left before Elena could formulate a response, the door clicking shut with a finality that made her feel trapped and cared for in equal measure. Sophie was already at the cart, eyes locked on the toy store bag. "Mommy, can I look?" Elena wanted to say no, wanted to pack everything back up and leave it in the hallway, take Sophie and walk out before they got any more tangled in this billionaire's charity. But Sophie's face was so hopeful, so full of the kind of childish excitement that had been missing since Marcus died, and Elena couldn't bring herself to crush it. "Okay, but just look. We might have to give some of this back." Sophie pulled out the bag carefully, reverently, like it might disappear if she moved too fast. Inside were wrapped presents, 4 of them, different sizes, all with neat bows and gift tags that said "for Sophie" in handwriting that was definitely not Mason's. Probably Liam's. Probably something he'd done at midnight or 6 in the morning because his boss had asked. "Can I open one?" Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. Elena looked at her daughter, at the hope and fear warring on her face, at the way her small hands clutched the package like it was made of glass, and something inside her cracked. "Yeah, baby, you can open them." The first present was a stuffed polar bear, soft and white with a red scarf. Sophie hugged it immediately, buried her face in its fur. "He's perfect." The second was a set of building blocks, the expensive kind that came in a wooden box. The third was a children's book about a girl and her dragon. The fourth was an art set, markers, crayons, colored pencils, paper, stickers that made Sophie gasp. "Mommy, look! I can draw again!" Elena's eyes burned. She'd had to leave Sophie's art supplies at the motel when they got evicted, along with most of their other possessions. Had watched her daughter cry over the abandoned crayons, and there'd been nothing Elena could do except promise they'd get new ones someday. Now Sophie was spreading markers across the hotel room floor, already planning her first drawing, and Elena had to turn away before the tears spilled over. She focused on the food instead. Made plates for both of them, hot chocolate for Sophie, and coffee for herself from the machine in the room. They ate sitting on the floor next to Sophie's new toys, and for a few minutes Elena let herself pretend this was normal, that they lived here, that this was their life. Then reality crashed back in, and she pulled out her phone to look at her bank balance. $47. That was it. Everything she had in the world, plus the cash Mason had given her, which didn't really count because it wasn't hers to keep. Her phone rang, the same unknown number from earlier. "Hello? Elena, it's Catherine Harris, Mason's mother-in-law." The voice was warm, professional, with an edge of something that might have been concern. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, it's fine. How did you get this number?" "Liam gave it to me. I'm sorry to intrude, but Mason mentioned what happened last night, and I wanted to reach out. I work with several family services organizations in Chicago, and I thought I might be able to help." Elena's defenses went up immediately. "I appreciate that, but we're fine. Are you?" Catherine's tone was gentle but direct. "Because Mason said you were heading to a shelter that doesn't exist anymore. That suggests you're not fine." "With respect, Mrs. Harris, this isn't your business." "You're right, it's not. But I'm making it my business anyway." There was a pause. "I lost my daughter 3 years ago, Sarah, Mason's wife, and I've spent every day since trying to figure out how to help people the way she would have wanted me to. So please, let me help you, no strings attached." Elena closed her eyes. "Why does everyone in your family think they can fix strangers?" "Because sometimes strangers are just people who haven't become friends yet." Catherine's voice softened. "I'm not trying to fix you, Elena. I'm trying to offer resources. There's a difference." "What kind of resources?" "Well, for starters, I know you need a job. Mason mentioned he's setting up an interview, which is wonderful, but it's not immediate income. I can connect you with emergency assistance programs, food, clothing, temporary housing support. And if you're interested, I run a professional development program for women in transition. Job training, resume building, interview prep, all free." It sounded too good to be true, which in Elena's experience meant it probably was. What's the catch? No catch, just a lot of paperwork and a commitment to showing up. Sophie was coloring now, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration, completely absorbed in her new markers. Elena watched her daughter and felt the weight of every decision pressing down on her shoulders. Can I think about it? Of course. I'll have Liam send you my contact information. Call me when you're ready. Catherine hesitated. And Elena? Merry Christmas. I hope today is better than yesterday. The line went dead before Elena could respond. She sat there for a long moment, phone in hand, trying to process the fact that strangers were organizing her life without asking permission. It should have made her angry. Instead, she just felt tired. By 9:30, Sophie had drawn 3 pictures: a polar bear, a Christmas tree, and a family of stick figures that made Elena's chest hurt. By 9:45, Elena had showered for the first time in 3 days, using hotel shampoo that smelled like lavender and felt like luxury. By 9:55, she'd dressed in new jeans and a sweater from the pile Liam had delivered, both of which fit perfectly despite the fact that she'd never provided her size. At exactly 10 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. Elena checked the peephole. Mason Reed stood in the hallway looking nothing like a billionaire. Jeans again, a navy sweater, the same worn leather jacket from last night. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd forgotten to comb it, and he was carrying a small Christmas tree. She opened the door. Hi, Mason said. I brought reinforcements. The tree was maybe 3 feet tall, already decorated with lights and small ornaments, sitting in a pot wrapped in red foil. Behind Mason stood a little boy clutching a bag of wrapped presents, looking simultaneously excited and terrified. This is my son Liam, Mason said. We thought Sophie might like some company. The boy, not Liam Chen, a different Liam, stepped forward and held out his hand with the careful formality of a child who'd been coached. It's nice to meet you. Merry Christmas. Elena shook his hand, feeling ambushed and touched in equal measure. Merry Christmas to you too. Sophie appeared at Elena's elbow, peeking around her mother's legs. Hi. Hi, Liam said. I'm 7. How old are you? 6. Almost 6.5. Cool. Do you like building things? I brought blocks. Just like that, the 2 kids were on the floor, Sophie showing off her new toys while Liam unpacked the presents he'd brought. Mason and Elena stood in the doorway watching, neither quite sure what to say. This is too much, Elena finally managed. Probably. Mason set the tree on the dresser, adjusted it slightly. But it's Christmas, and I figured Sophie deserved a real one, even if it's small. You can't just keep giving us things. Why not? Because we can't pay you back. Mason turned to look at her, and his expression was so open, so genuinely confused, that Elena felt her anger deflate. I don't want you to pay me back. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? Because in my experience, nothing is free. In your experience, you've been dealing with the wrong people. He gestured to the kids. Can we sit? I'd like to talk to you about something. They sat at the small table by the window, far enough from the kids to have privacy, but close enough to keep an eye on them. Outside, the city was waking up, church bells, distant traffic, the muffled sounds of Christmas morning. Liam told you about the interview, Mason said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I want you to know it's real, not a pity offer. I looked into your background. I hope you don't mind. And you have experience in hospitality management, hotel front desk, event coordination, good references from jobs you held before. He trailed off delicately. Before my husband died. Elena finished the sentence because someone had to. Before we lost everything and ended up homeless. Mason didn't flinch. Yes, I have an opening in my company's corporate hospitality division. It's not glamorous, coordinating internal events, managing client visits, some travel logistics. But it pays well, has full benefits, and it's stable. I think you'd be good at it. You don't even know me. I know you counted change for pancakes you wouldn't eat so your daughter could have dinner. I know you were walking into a blizzard on Christmas Eve rather than ask for help. That tells me more about your character than any resume could. Elena looked away, blinking hard. What if I'm terrible at the job? Then we'll figure it out. But I don't think you will be. He leaned forward slightly. Elena, I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm trying to offer you an opportunity. What you do with it is entirely up to you. Why? The question came out raw. Why do you care? You don't owe us anything. Mason was quiet for a long moment, watching the kids. Liam had taught Sophie how to stack the blocks into a tower, and they were both giggling as it inevitably collapsed. My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. It was fast, 8 months from diagnosis to funeral, and for a long time after, I was just empty. Going through the motions, taking care of my son because I had to, running my company because it was easier than sitting still. I forgot what it felt like to do something that mattered. He turned back to Elena, and she saw the same exhaustion in his eyes that she felt in her bones. Last night, when I saw you in that diner, I saw someone who was fighting, who wasn't giving up even though it would have been easier to. And I thought maybe helping you would remind me what that felt like. Being useful, being human. So this is for you, Elena said, but there was no accusation in it, just understanding. Maybe, partly, Mason's smile was sad. But mostly it's because I can help, and it costs me nothing to do it. And my son is happier right now than he's been in months because he got to play Santa Claus. So yeah, selfish and selfless all mixed up together. Elena looked at the two kids again. They'd moved on to Sophie's new art set, both of them drawing with fierce concentration. Liam was explaining something about dinosaurs, and Sophie was listening with rapt attention. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? Okay, I'll take the interview and the hotel room for now, and the help from your mother-in-law. Elena met his eyes. But I'm going to pay you back someday. Maybe not with money, but somehow, because I don't like owing people. Fair enough. Mason stood, held out his hand. Deal. She shook it, and his grip was firm and warm and steadier than she felt. Thank you. You're welcome. He glanced at his watch. I should probably let you get back to your Christmas. But if you need anything, and I mean anything, Liam's number is programmed into your phone. The other Liam, my assistant, he'll help. You programmed your assistant's number into my phone without asking? I took some liberties. Mason had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. In my defense, it seemed practical. Despite everything, Elena laughed. It felt strange, rusty, like a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. You're very pushy for a billionaire. I prefer persistent. He called to his son. Liam, we should head out. Let Sophie have Christmas with her mom. 5 more minutes? Young Liam looked up with pleading eyes. We're almost done with the castle. Mason looked at Elena. If it's okay with Ms. Hart. Elena, please. And yes, 5 minutes is fine. But 5 minutes turned into 10, then 20, and somehow Mason ended up on the floor helping with the castle, while Elena made more hot chocolate and watched these two broken families fit together like puzzle pieces that didn't know they'd been looking for each other. Young Liam kept glancing at his father with something that looked like relief. Sophie hadn't smiled this much in 6 months, and Elena found herself sitting next to Mason on the carpet, passing him blocks, engaging in small talk that felt remarkably normal considering they'd met 12 hours ago. Your mother-in-law seems nice, Elena said. Catherine? She's the best. Basically raised Liam after Sarah died because I was useless for about a year. Mason didn't sound bitter, just matter of fact. She keeps me honest. How long were you married? 9 years, together for 12. He stacked another block carefully. You? 8 years married, 10 together. Elena's voice went quiet. Marcus. He was a contractor. Good with his hands, terrible with money. We were always scraping by, but we were happy. What happened? Accident on a job site. Fell 3 stories. Died before the ambulance arrived. The words came out flat, recited. She'd said them so many times they'd stopped meaning anything. No life insurance because we couldn't afford it. No savings. The hospital bills took everything. Lost the apartment 6 weeks later, the car a month after that. And here we are. Mason's hand stilled on the blocks. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. They sat in silence while the kids chattering about their castle, about Christmas, about nothing and everything. Elena could feel Mason watching her, not with pity exactly, but with understanding, like he knew what it felt like to have your life ripped apart and be expected to just keep going. It gets easier, he said finally. Not better, not okay, but easier. Does it? Some days. He added another block to the tower. Some days it still hits me out of nowhere, and I can't breathe. But those days are further apart now than they used to be. Elena nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. Another knock at the door interrupted the moment. Elena answered it to find a hotel employee with another cart, this one loaded with wrapped boxes. "Delivery for Ms. Hart and Mrs. Sophie Hart," the woman said cheerfully. "Merry Christmas." Elena stared. "I didn't order anything." "They're from the Reed Foundation." The employee wheeled the cart inside. "Mr. Reed wanted to make sure you had Christmas presents." Mason stood up, brushing off his jeans. "That might have been Catherine. She's very enthusiastic about holidays." "Mason." "I didn't know she was doing this, I swear." Elena counted at least a dozen boxes, all beautifully wrapped, all with tags that said either Elena or Sophie. It was too much. Way too much. She opened her mouth to say so, but Sophie had already noticed. "Mommy, look! More presents!" And there it was, pure joy on her daughter's face, the kind of uncomplicated happiness that 6-year-olds were supposed to have. Elena couldn't take that away. Not on Christmas. "Okay," she said, defeated. "Okay, we'll keep them, but this has to stop. No more deliveries, no more surprises. This is enough." "I'll talk to Catherine," Mason promised, but he was smiling. The hotel employee left, and for the next hour the hotel room became a chaos of wrapping paper and laughter. Sophie opened gifts, clothes that actually fit, books, more toys, a warm winter coat with a hood, while Liam helped her and offered commentary on each one. Elena opened her own presents, practical things like boots and a purse and a professional work bag, but also a cashmere scarf that made her cry because she hadn't owned anything that soft in years. Mason sat back and watched, and Elena caught him looking at his son with an expression of such profound gratitude that she had to look away. By noon, the kids were crashed on the bed, exhausted from excitement, Sophie clutching her polar bear and Liam reading her the dragon book in a quiet voice. Mason and Elena stood at the window watching the snow-covered city. "Thank you," Elena said. "I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. This is the best Christmas Sophie's had in a long time. She's a good kid." "She is." Elena paused. "So is yours. You're doing a good job with him." "I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm failing." "Welcome to parenthood." Mason laughed softly. "Yeah." They stood there in comfortable silence until Mason's phone buzzed. He checked it, sighed. "Catherine wants us for dinner. I should probably go before she sends a search party." "Of course." He called to Liam, who looked up reluctantly from the book. "Do we have to? Grandma's making her famous lasagna. Can Sophie come?" Mason looked at Elena, eyebrows raised in question. "You're both welcome, if you want." Elena's first instinct was to say no, to maintain boundaries, keep distance, not get any more tangled in this family's generosity. But Sophie was already sitting up, looking hopeful, and Elena was so tired of disappointing her. "Are you sure? We don't want to intrude." Catherine made enough food for 20 people. She always does. And honestly, it would make Liam happy. He doesn't usually warm up to people this fast. "Okay," Elena heard herself say. "We'll come. Thank you." The smile on Sophie's face was worth whatever complications this would create later. They left the hotel at 2. Mason's Mercedes navigating the snowy streets while the kids chattered in the back seat. Catherine's house was in Evanston, a brick Tudor that looked like something out of a magazine, with Christmas lights strung along the roofline and a wreath on the front door. Catherine herself answered, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and the kind of warm presence that made you want to tell her your problems. "You must be Elena, and this beautiful girl is Sophie. Come in, come in. You'll freeze out there." The house smelled like tomato sauce and garlic bread and pine. A massive Christmas tree dominated the living room, covered in ornaments that looked handmade and loved. Photos covered every surface, Sarah, Mason, and Sarah together, baby Liam, family portraits spanning decades. "I'm so glad you could join us," Catherine said, taking their coats. "It's been just the 3 of us the last couple years. It's nice to have a fuller table." Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Catherine asked questions without being intrusive, told stories about Sarah that made Mason smile despite the sadness in his eyes, and treated Sophie like she'd known her for years. The kids ate until they couldn't move, then disappeared to play with Liam's toys while the adults cleaned up. "So," Catherine said, elbow deep in soapy water. Mason tells me you're interviewing for a position at Reed Tech, if the offer's still open. Elena dried plates with mechanical efficiency. I know it's a lot to take on faith. Mason has good instincts about people. Catherine handed her another plate. And I looked at your resume. You're qualified. Liam sent you my resume? I asked for it. I like to know who my son-in-law is helping. Catherine's smile took any sting out of the words. I also wanted to tell you about that program I mentioned, the one for women in transition. We have a cohort starting in 2 weeks. Job training, networking, childcare assistance. I think you'd benefit from it. Elena set down the plate. Mrs. Harris, Catherine, I appreciate everything you and Mason are doing, really, but I need to do this on my own. I need to prove I can take care of Sophie without handouts. Taking help isn't the same as taking handouts. Catherine turned to face her, hands dripping. I spent 30 years as a social worker before I retired, Elena. I've seen hundreds of women in your position. The ones who make it aren't the ones who refuse help. They're the ones who accept it gracefully, use it wisely, and pay it forward when they can. I don't know how to do that. None of us do at first. Catherine dried her hands, then took Elena's gently. But you'll learn, and we'll help. From the living room came the sound of children laughing, and Elena felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Maybe it was okay to accept this. Maybe fighting alone wasn't the same as being strong. Okay, she said quietly. Tell me about the program. They talked for an hour while Mason put the kids in front of a Christmas movie and tried not to eavesdrop. By the time Elena and Sophie left, driven back to the hotel by Mason, with leftovers packed by Catherine and promises to call about the program, Elena felt more hopeful than she had in months. Thank you for today, she said as Mason pulled up to the Whitmore. For everything. You're welcome. He put the car in park, turned to face her. The interview is the day after tomorrow, 10 a.m. Liam will send you the details. I'll be there? I know you will. He smiled. And Elena? You're going to be okay. Both of you. She wanted to believe him. Almost did. In the back seat, Sophie was half asleep, clutching her polar bear. Elena gathered her daughter and the leftovers and headed inside, into the warm lobby that still felt surreal. The elevator ride up was quiet. Sophie mumbled something about Liam being nice, about wanting to see him again. Elena stroked her hair and didn't make promises she couldn't keep. In their room, she tucked Sophie into bed and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow, they'd still be here. The day after, she'd have an interview that could change their lives. Next week, she'd start a program that might help her rebuild. It wasn't a guarantee. Nothing was. But it was more than she'd had yesterday. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Catherine. I forgot to give you this earlier. Here's the program information. And Elena? You're stronger than you think. Sleep well. Elena read the message 3 times, then saved the number. Set an alarm for the morning. Checked her email to find details from Liam Chen about the interview, along with a note. Mr. Reed wanted me to mention the position comes with relocation assistance if needed. And there's a childcare center on site at Reed Tech. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, and let herself cry. Not sad tears this time. Just overwhelmed, exhausted, cautiously hopeful tears that she'd been holding back for 6 months. Sophie slept peacefully, her polar bear tucked under one arm. Outside, Chicago hummed with life. And somewhere across the city, Mason Reed was putting his own son to bed and thinking about second chances and the strange ways grief could lead you to exactly where you needed to be. Neither of them knew what came next, but for the first time in a long time, both of them were willing to find out. The interview was in 45 minutes, and Elena had changed her outfit 3 times. She stood in front of the hotel bathroom mirror in a navy blazer and slacks, both from Catherine's Christmas delivery, and tried to convince herself she looked like someone who belonged in a corporate office. Someone competent. Someone who hadn't been sleeping in her car 2 weeks ago. You look pretty, Mommy. Sophie sat on the bathroom counter, swinging her legs. The hotel had sent up breakfast an hour ago. Apparently Mason had arranged for daily room service, despite Elena's protests, and Sophie had syrup on her chin. Thanks, baby. Elena wiped the syrup away with a damp towel. You're sure you're okay going to Grandma Catherine's for a few hours? Uh-huh. She said we're making cookies. Catherine had insisted on watching Sophie during the interview, had shown up at 8:30 with a bag full of baking supplies and a confidence in Elena that felt unearned. She was down in the lobby now, probably charming the front desk staff and reorganizing their filing system. Elena's phone buzzed. Liam Chen. Car is waiting outside when you're ready. You'll do great. She took one last look in the mirror, grabbed the portfolio Catherine had given her, leather, professional, containing copies of her resume and references that Liam had somehow tracked down, and headed for the door. Catherine was exactly where Elena expected, chatting with the concierge about community outreach programs. She looked up when Elena approached, and her face broke into an encouraging smile. You look perfect, very professional. I feel like I'm playing dress-up. Fake it until you make it. That's what I did for 30 years. Catherine held out her hand to Sophie. Ready to make some very messy cookies? Sophie took her hand without hesitation, which should have made Elena happy, but instead made her chest tight. Her daughter was getting attached to these people. They both were. And when it all fell apart, because it would, things always did, Sophie would be the one who got hurt. Second thoughts? Catherine's voice was gentle. About 50 of them. Good. That means you care. Catherine squeezed her shoulder. Go knock their socks off. We'll be here when you get back. The car was a town car, black and gleaming, driven by a professional who held the door and called her ma'am. Elena sank into leather seats that probably cost more than her last month's rent and tried not to throw up from nerves. Reed Technologies was housed in a glass tower in the Loop, all modern architecture and corporate polish. Elena had looked it up last night. 53 floors, 1,500 employees, annual revenue in the billions. Mason's company. Mason, who'd bought her daughter pancakes and somehow decided that made her his responsibility. Security in the lobby checked her ID, gave her a visitor badge, directed her to the 32nd floor. The elevator was glass too, offering views of Chicago that made Elena's stomach lurch. She focused on the floor numbers instead, counting down the seconds until she had to perform. The 32nd floor was corporate hospitality, according to the directory. Sleek reception area, comfortable seating, abstract art that probably cost more than Elena would make in a year. The receptionist, young, polished, perfect, smiled at her approach. Elena Hart, Mr. Chen is expecting you. Conference room B, just down the hall. Elena followed the directions, her heels clicking on polished floors, and found Liam Chen waiting outside a glass-walled conference room. He looked different in the office. Still young, but authoritative in a way that suggested people listened when he talked. Miss Hart, good to see you again. He shook her hand, gestured to the conference room. We have a panel interview set up. Don't let that intimidate you. It's standard procedure for management positions. Panel interview. Elena's stomach dropped. How many people? 3. Myself, Jennifer Torres from HR, and Marcus Webb from corporate hospitality. He'd be your direct supervisor if you're hired. Liam must have seen something in her face because his expression softened. You'll be fine. Just be honest and be yourself. Be herself. Right. The herself who'd been homeless a week ago. That would definitely impress them. But she followed Liam into the conference room anyway, because what else was she going to do? She'd come this far. Jennifer Torres was a black woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Marcus Webb, no relation to her late husband, but the name still hit like a punch, was white, late 50s, with the weathered look of someone who'd worked his way up from the bottom. They both smiled, offered coffee, gestured to a seat at the head of the table. Elena sat, adjusted her blazer, and reminded herself to breathe. Thank you for coming in, Jennifer said. We've reviewed your resume and references, and I have to say your background in hospitality management is impressive. 4 years at the Drake Hotel, 2 years coordinating events for the Hilton Chicago. Those are competitive positions. Thank you. I enjoyed the work. But you left the field 3 years ago. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Can you tell us why? Here it was. The gap in her resume. The part where she explained how her life fell apart. Elena had practiced this answer in the mirror last night, had tried to find words that didn't sound like excuses. My husband was diagnosed with cancer, she said, keeping her voice steady. I took a leave of absence to care for him during treatment. He passed away 2 years ago, and I spent the following year focusing on my daughter and trying to figure out our next steps. The lie came easier than she expected. Marcus hadn't died of cancer. It had been sudden, violent, a fall that broke everything. But people understood cancer. Cancer didn't make them ask uncomfortable questions about why she hadn't had savings or family to fall back on. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Jennifer said softly. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. But I'm ready to return to work now. I need to provide stability for my daughter, and I know I can do this job well." Marcus made a note on his tablet. "The position we're discussing is corporate hospitality coordinator. You'd be managing internal events, board meetings, client visits, company gatherings, as well as coordinating travel and accommodations for executives and VIP guests. It requires flexibility, discretion, and the ability to handle high-pressure situations." "Does that align with your experience?" "Yes. At the Drake, I coordinated events for groups ranging from 20 to 200 people. I managed vendor relationships, handled last-minute changes, worked with difficult clients. I'm comfortable with pressure." "Good." Marcus smiled slightly. "Because we specialize in difficult around here. Mr. Reed has particular standards." Elena met his eyes. "I've met Mr. Reed. I think I can handle his standards." Liam coughed, which might have been covering a laugh. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You know Mason personally?" "We met recently. He's been very kind to my family." "That sounds like Mason." Jennifer's smile was genuine. "He has a habit of collecting strays. I mean that affectionately. I was one of them 10 years ago. Single mother, no degree, working 3 jobs. He hired me as an administrative assistant and paid for me to finish my bachelor's." The comment settled something in Elena's chest. She wasn't the first person Mason had helped. This was a pattern, not a pity project. The interview continued for another 30 minutes. They asked about her experience with budget management, crisis response, vendor negotiations. Elena answered as honestly as she could, drawing on skills she'd thought were lost to her previous life. It felt good, using her brain this way again, remembering that she was more than just a mother struggling to survive. When they finally stood, shook hands, and thanked her for coming in, Elena felt cautiously optimistic. Not confident, she'd learned not to count on anything, but hopeful in a way she hadn't been in months. "We'll be in touch by the end of the week," Jennifer said. "But between you and me, I think you'd be a good fit here." Liam walked her back to the elevator. "That went well." "You think so?" "I know so. Jennifer doesn't say things she doesn't mean, and Marcus only smiles at people he likes." Liam hit the button for the lobby. "For what it's worth, I think you're exactly what this team needs. Someone who knows what it's like to fight for things, who doesn't take stability for granted." Elena blinked hard against the sudden sting in her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If you get the job, I'll be working you to the bone." But his smile took the edge off the words. The elevator doors opened in the lobby, and Elena was about to step out when she saw Mason crossing the marble floor. He spotted her at the same moment, changed direction. "Elena, how'd it go?" "I think it went okay. I don't know. I'm terrible at reading these things." "Marcus is impossible to read. Jennifer's the one to watch. If she liked you, you're in." Mason glanced at Liam. "Did she like her?" "I'm not supposed to say." "That means yes." Mason looked back at Elena, and something in his expression shifted. "You want to get lunch?" "I know a place." Elena checked her phone. 12:15. Catherine wasn't expecting her back until 2. "I should get back to Sophie." "Catherine texted me 20 minutes ago. They're making a second batch of cookies and Sophie wants to decorate them. We've got time." She should say no. Should maintain professional boundaries, keep distance between her personal life and this potential job. But Mason was looking at her like she was a real person, not a charity case, and Elena realized she wanted to have lunch with him. "Okay, but somewhere cheap. I'm buying." "You're not buying." "Then I'm not going," Mason sighed. "Fine. You can buy. But we're going to Lou Mitchell's, and you're getting the pie." Lou Mitchell's was a diner, not as old or worn as the Golden Lantern, but same basic concept. Vinyl booze, huge portions, waitresses who called everyone honey. They slid into a booth near the back, and Mason ordered coffee while Elena studied the menu with an eye on prices. "Get whatever you want," Mason said. "The pot roast is incredible." "I'm getting a sandwich." Elena, I have $47 in my bank account, Mason. I'm getting a sandwich. He was quiet for a moment, then flagged down the waitress. 2 pot roasts, extra vegetables, and save room for pie. We'll order that after. Elena wanted to argue, but the waitress was already gone, and she was too tired to fight. You're very pushy. You've mentioned that. Mason dumped sugar in his coffee, 3 packets, which seemed excessive. How are you really doing? At the hotel? With everything? Honestly, I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Elena wrapped her hands around her water glass. This is too good to be real. Any minute now, someone's going to realize they made a mistake and take it all away. That's not going to happen. You can't know that. I can, actually, because I'm the one making it happen, and I don't make mistakes. He said it matter-of-factly, without arrogance. You're not a charity case, Elena. You're someone who got dealt a bad hand and needed a reset. That's all this is. A reset. The food arrived. Massive plates of pot roast, mashed potatoes, and carrots that steamed in the cold air. Elena's stomach growled embarrassingly loud. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that felt earned rather than awkward. The restaurant filled up around them. Lunch rush, business people and tourists and families. Normal life happening all around them while Elena tried to remember what normal felt like. Can I ask you something? Mason set down his fork. What made you come to Chicago? Milwaukee isn't that far. Why not stay there where you had connections? Elena swallowed her bite carefully. Marcus's family is in Milwaukee. After he died, they made it very clear they blamed me for how things turned out. Said if I'd been a better wife, he would have been more careful, would have had insurance, wouldn't have been working that job in the first place. The words tasted bitter even 2 years later. His mother tried to take Sophie from me, said I was unfit. I left before she could make good on the threat. Mason's expression darkened. That's unbelievable. That's grief. People need someone to blame, and I was convenient. Elena pushed potatoes around her plate. I thought Chicago would be better. Bigger city, more opportunities. Turns out being homeless in Chicago is just as hard as being homeless anywhere else. You're not homeless anymore. I'm living in a hotel room you're paying for. That's basically the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing. Mason leaned forward. You have a roof over your head, food, safety. Sophie's warm and fed and playing with my kid right now instead of being scared. That matters, Elena. Don't diminish it. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same exhaustion she felt mirrored back. The same bone-deep weariness that came from carrying too much for too long. You lost your wife. I lost my husband. We both know what it's like to have everything fall apart. So why are you okay and I'm not? Who says I'm okay? Mason's laugh was hollow. I run a billion-dollar company, and most days I can barely get out of bed. I have a kid who needs me, and I feel like I'm failing him constantly. The only reason I'm functional at all is because I have resources, money, staff, my mother-in-law, who basically raised Liam while I was useless. You've been doing this alone with nothing. The fact that you're still standing is pretty incredible. Elena's throat tightened. I don't feel incredible. I feel like I'm barely holding on. Yeah, I know the feeling. They finished their meal in silence again, but this time it felt heavier, weighted with shared understanding that didn't need words. When the waitress brought pie, apple for Elena, cherry for Mason, both slices enormous, they picked at it half-heartedly. My wife wanted more kids, Mason said suddenly. We'd been trying for 2 years when she got diagnosed, and I remember thinking, after she died, that at least we only had Liam, that it would be easier with just one kid to explain it to. He set down his fork. But lately, I've been thinking maybe she was right. Maybe Liam needs siblings, someone to share the weight with. You thinking about dating again? No? The answer came fast, definitive. I can't imagine being with someone who isn't Sarah, but adoption, maybe, or fostering. He looked up, met her eyes. Does that sound crazy? It sounds lonely, Elena said quietly, trying to fill a void with something that's not what you actually want. Mason flinched. Harsh, but fair. I'm sorry, that came out wrong. No, you're right. It's just hard to admit I might be stuck like this, that maybe I won't ever want to move on. He pushed his pie around. What about you? You ever think about dating? With what time? What energy? Elena shook her head. Besides, Who wants a broke single mother with trust issues? Someone with sense, hopefully. You're a catch, Elena, she snorted. Right, I'm killing it right now. I'm serious. You're smart, resilient, a great mother. Any guy would be lucky. Says the billionaire who feels sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for you. Mason's voice went sharp. I respect you. There's a difference. Elena studied his face, looking for the lie, but found only sincerity. It unsettled her more than pity would have. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it. Just accept it. Mason signaled for the check. And before you argue, I'm paying. You can get it next time. There's going to be a next time? Why wouldn't there be? Liam's already asking when he can see Sophie again. Catherine's planning a play date. You're stuck with us now. The waitress brought the check, and true to his word, Mason paid before Elena could reach for her purse. They walked out into afternoon sun that felt too bright after the dim restaurant, squinting against the glare. Thank you for lunch, Elena said. And for the interview. And for everything else. I keep saying that, don't I? You're allowed to be grateful. Just don't let it make you feel like you owe me something. Mason pulled out his phone, typed something. I'm sending a car to take you back to the hotel, and before you protest, it's on my way, and it's freezing out. Elena's phone buzzed with the car notification. She was learning to pick her battles with him. Fine, but I'm walking next time. Deal? The car arrived moments later, and Mason held the door for her like she was someone important, like she mattered. Elena settled into the back seat, looked back at him standing on the sidewalk. Mason? Yeah? Your wife was lucky to have you. Something flickered across his face, pain, maybe, or regret. I wasn't always this version of myself. The good parts came from her. I'm just trying to live up to what she would have wanted. The door closed before Elena could respond, and the car pulled away, leaving Mason on the sidewalk getting smaller in the rearview mirror. Elena watched until he disappeared, then leaned back against the seat and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her phone rang. Catherine. How'd the interview go? I think it went well. Mason said Jennifer liked me. Jennifer's the key. If she liked you, you're in. Catherine's voice was warm with certainty. We're at my house now. Sophie's having the time of her life. You should see these cookies, architectural marvels of frosting and sprinkles. I'm on my way back now. Actually, would you mind coming here instead? The girls are asking for a tea party, and I could use another adult to help wrangle them. Elena blinked. Girls plural? Liam invited his friend Emma from school. It's turned into quite the production. Catherine laughed. No pressure, but if you're free, we'd love to have you. 20 minutes later, Elena was standing in Catherine's kitchen watching 3 children, Sophie, young Liam, and a girl with braids who must be Emma, set up an elaborate tea party with actual china. Catherine had put out cookies, finger sandwiches, and what appeared to be actual tea in a proper pot. Mommy! Sophie ran over, tackling Elena's legs. Look what we made! Grandma Catherine taught us how to make royal icing. Grandma Catherine. The title hit Elena sideways. Sophie had never known her grandmothers. Both had died before she was born. Hearing her use it so casually, so naturally, made Elena's chest ache. Catherine caught her eye over Sophie's head, raised an eyebrow in question. Elena managed to smile, nodded that it was okay. What else could she do? The tea party was elaborate and chaotic and more fun than Elena had had in years. The kids insisted the adults participate, which meant Elena ended up sitting on the floor in her interview clothes, holding a teacup with her pinky out, while Sophie poured imaginary tea and Liam explained the rules of proper tea party etiquette with the seriousness of a protocol officer. Mason arrived sometime in the middle of the 3rd course. The kids had decided there needed to be multiple courses and stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Did I miss the invitation? Daddy! Liam jumped up. You have to join us. We're having a proper English tea party. I can see that. Mason caught Elena's eye, smiled. Guess I'm overdressed. He sat down next to Elena, accepted a teacup from Emma, and played along with a patience that suggested this was normal for him. The kids giggled, poured more imaginary tea, debated whether crumpets were the same as English muffins. Catherine watched from the kitchen with a soft smile, occasionally refilling the cookie plate or bringing more sandwiches. This was her element: family chaos, children laughing, people together. Elena wondered how often she got to experience it since Sarah died. How often this house felt full. By 5 o'clock, the kids were crashing from sugar, sprawled on the living room floor watching a movie. Mason and Elena ended up at the kitchen table while Catherine prepared dinner. She'd insisted they stay, wouldn't take no for an answer. "This is nice," Mason said quietly. "The house feeling alive again." Catherine mentioned it's usually just you three. "Yeah, Sarah had a brother, but he's overseas, military. Catherine doesn't have much other family." He watched his son through the doorway. "I think she's been lonely. She hides it well, but I can tell. Sophie called her grandma. I heard. Is that okay?" Elena considered. "I think so. She needs that. Someone steady and loving who isn't me." "You're steady and loving." "I'm trying to be. Most days I feel like I'm faking it." "That's what being a parent is," Catherine said from the stove. "Faking it until they're old enough to realize you have no idea what you're doing. By then, hopefully, they love you too much to care." They all laughed, and it felt good. Natural. Like this was something they did regularly instead of a strange convergence of broken families trying to fit together. Dinner was pot roast, apparently Catherine's signature dish, and the kids ate at the coffee table in front of the TV while the adults sat at the dining room table. Mason opened a bottle of wine, poured glasses for Elena and Catherine despite Elena's weak protest. "To new beginnings," Catherine said, raising her glass, "and to finding family in unexpected places." They drank to that, and Elena felt the warmth of the wine spread through her chest. Or maybe it was just the warmth of being here, in this house, with these people who'd somehow decided she was worth their time. After dinner, Sophie fell asleep on Catherine's couch, and Elena couldn't bring herself to wake her. She looked so peaceful, so content, like a kid who wasn't carrying the weight of her mother's mistakes. "Leave her," Catherine suggested. "You both can stay in the guest room. I have plenty of space." "I couldn't—" "Elena." Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. "It's late. Sophie's asleep. And you've had a long day. Stay. Please." So she did. Let Catherine show her to a guest room that was bigger than the hotel room, with a bed that could fit 3 people and an attached bathroom with actual towels instead of hotel ones. Sophie barely stirred when Elena carried her upstairs, just mumbled something and curled into the pillows. Elena stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her daughter sleep in a real bed, in a real house, with people who cared about them downstairs. It felt like a dream, the kind she'd wake up from and find herself back in the car, shivering and scared. "She's out cold." Mason appeared beside her, voice low. "Liam's the same way. Sugar crash. Thank you for today. The interview, lunch, this, all of it. Stop thanking me." "I can't seem to help it." They stood there in comfortable silence, 2 parents watching their kids sleep, until Mason spoke again. "You're going to get the job. I know Jennifer, and she doesn't give false hope, so you need to start thinking about permanent housing. The hotel is fine for now, but you'll need something more stable. I've been looking at apartments. Most require first month, last month, and security deposit. Even with a job, I won't have that kind of money for weeks. What if you didn't have to wait?" Mason turned to face her. "Catherine has a rental property about 10 minutes from here. 2-bedroom, good school district. The tenant just moved out. She's been planning to renovate before relisting, but it's livable as is." Elena's stomach dropped. "Mason, I can't—" "Market rate. Catherine charges fair rent, not favors. And yes, you'd have to come up with deposit eventually, but she'd let you move in first and pay it in installments once you're working. It's good business. Better to have a reliable tenant than an empty property." "This is too much." "It's practical. Sophie needs stability. You need to be near good schools and your job. This solves multiple problems." He paused. "At least look at it before you say no." Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her independence, prove she could do this without their help. But she thought about Sophie sleeping peacefully in a real bed, about the way her daughter had laughed today, about the possibility of giving her a real home instead of hotel rooms and temporary shelters. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll look at it." Mason's smile was relieved. "Good. We can go tomorrow if you want. Catherine has the keys." Downstairs, Catherine was cleaning up the kitchen, humming something that might have been a Christmas carol. Mason went to help her, and Elena stood in the hallway, caught between floors, between her old life and whatever this new one was becoming. Her phone buzzed. An email from Jennifer Torres. Thank you for interviewing today. We'd like to extend an offer for the corporate hospitality coordinator position. Please see attached details. Welcome to Reed Technologies. Elena read the email 3 times, then sat down hard on the stairs. She'd gotten the job. She actually had a job. Benefits, salary, stability, a future that wasn't just survival. The tears came before she could stop them, big gulping sobs that she tried to muffle into her hands. Downstairs, the murmur of voices stopped. Elena? Catherine appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Sweetheart, what's wrong? Elena held up her phone, couldn't find words. Catherine took it, read the email, and her face broke into a brilliant smile. Mason, get up here! He appeared seconds later, took the phone Catherine handed him, and his expression softened. Congratulations. I got the job. Elena's voice came out shaky. I actually got the job. Of course you did. Catherine sat beside her on the stairs, pulled her into a hug. I told you Jennifer doesn't give false hope. Mason sat on her other side, and for a moment Elena was flanked by these 2 people who'd known her less than a week, but had somehow decided she mattered. It should have felt intrusive. Instead, it felt like safety. What's the salary? Mason asked. Elena found the attachment, read the number, and felt fresh tears start. $65,000 a year. More money than she'd made in her entire life. More money than she'd thought possible. That's good, Mason said. That's really good. It's incredible. Elena wiped her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll start next Monday, Catherine suggested. Say you'll let us take you apartment hunting tomorrow. Say you'll let yourself be happy for 5 minutes. Elena laughed through the tears. Okay, yes to all of that. They sat on the stairs together, an unlikely trio, until the clock in the hall chimed 9. Upstairs, Sophie slept peacefully. Outside, Chicago sparkled with lights. And Elena Hart, for the first time in 2 years, let herself believe that maybe everything would be okay. She didn't know about the struggles ahead, the adjustment to office life, the moments she'd doubt herself. The day's grief would hit her sideways and make everything feel impossible. She didn't know that Mason would become more than just a benefactor, that Catherine would become the mother figure she'd never had, that Sophie and young Liam would become inseparable. She didn't know that in 6 months she'd be thriving at Reed Technologies, that in a year she'd be leading her own team, that the apartment Catherine showed her tomorrow would become a real home, filled with laughter and art projects and the kind of ordinary chaos that meant family. She didn't know that she and Mason would spend countless evenings talking after the kids went to bed, sharing their grief, and slowly, carefully, learning to live again. That friendship would deepen into something neither of them expected, something that felt like coming home. But she'd find out, starting tomorrow, starting with hope. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that had seen better decades. But it had working heat and windows that locked and a landlord who wasn't a stranger doing charity. Elena stood in the empty living room on a Saturday morning in January, watching Sophie run from room to room with the kind of excitement that made Elena's chest ache. This one's mine, Sophie called from the smaller bedroom. Can I paint it purple? Catherine, who'd driven them over with a trunk full of cleaning supplies, appeared in the doorway. Let's start with clean walls and work our way up to purple. Elena walked through the space slowly, cataloging what they'd need: furniture, dishes, towels, all the mundane things that made a place livable. The hotel had spoiled them with its conveniences, but this was real. This was theirs. What do you think? Catherine asked, joining her by the window that overlooked a small courtyard. I think it's perfect. Elena's voice came out thick. I think I can't believe this is happening. Believe it. You start work Monday, first paycheck comes in 2 weeks, and this place is yours as long as you want it. Catherine squeezed her shoulder. Marcus, my Marcus, not yours. And I lived in a place like this when Sarah was little. Best years of our lives. It's not about the size, Elena. It's about what you build inside it. They spent the day cleaning, scrubbing floors, wiping down cabinets, washing windows until they sparkled. Sophie helped with the enthusiasm of a 6-year-old, which meant she mostly spread dirt around while singing off-key. By 3 o'clock, the place smelled like lemon cleaner and possibility. Mason showed up at 4 with young Liam in a pickup truck full of furniture. Don't ask where I got it. Catherine made calls. The furniture was decent, a couch that had been reupholstered, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs, beds for both bedrooms that Catherine swore had been thoroughly cleaned. Nothing matched, everything was secondhand, and Elena had never loved anything more in her life. The beds are from the foundation, Catherine explained, directing Mason and Liam where to put the larger pieces. We keep a stock for families transitioning to stable housing. The couch is from my neighbor who just redecorated. The table was in my basement collecting dust. I can't just take all this. You're not taking it, you're using it. There's a difference. Catherine handed her a box of dishes. These were Sarah's, from her first apartment. I've been holding on to them for years, waiting for the right person. I think she'd want Sophie to have them. Elena looked at the simple white plates, the mismatched mugs, and felt tears threatening again. She'd been crying a lot lately. Happy tears, grateful tears, overwhelmed tears. Marcus used to tease her about being emotional. She wondered what he'd think of her now, accepting handouts from strangers, letting other people rebuild her life. Probably he'd tell her to stop being proud and just accept the help. By 6, the apartment looked almost livable. Sophie and young Liam had claimed the smaller bedroom as a fort, building elaborate structures out of moving boxes. Mason and Elena sat on the floor in the living room, backs against the new old couch, while Catherine made a supply list in the kitchen. First night in a new place, Mason said. That's always weird. Is it terrible that I'm scared? Elena pulled her knees to her chest. Like I'm waiting for someone to take it away? Not terrible. Understandable. He shifted to face her. But no one's taking this away. You earned it. The job, the apartment, all of it. You did the interview. You impressed Jennifer and Marcus. You got hired on merit. This isn't charity. It feels like charity. That's your pride talking. Learn to tell it to shut up. Mason's smile took the edge off. I had to learn that after Sarah died. Everyone wanted to help. And I kept refusing because I thought accepting help meant I was failing. Catherine finally sat me down and told me that letting people help wasn't weakness. It was giving them purpose, letting them feel useful when everything felt useless. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same exhaustion she felt, the same barely healed wounds. Does it get easier? The guilt of still being here when they're not? Some days, Mason's voice went quiet. Some days I can go hours without thinking about her. Other days I can't breathe from missing her. There's no pattern to it, no timeline, just days you survive and days you don't. Which kind is today? Surviving, barely. He leaned his head back against the couch. She would have loved this, helping you get set up. Sarah was always collecting people, finding ways to fix things. I think that's why I'm drawn to it now. Like if I help enough people, maybe I can make up for the fact that I couldn't help her. Elena reached over, took his hand. It felt natural, that small connection. You can't save everyone. I know, doesn't stop me from trying. They sat like that, hands linked, while Catherine puttered in the kitchen and the kids destroyed the bedroom with their fort building. It should have felt strange, this intimacy with someone she'd known less than 2 weeks. But it didn't. It felt like finding someone who spoke the same language of grief. Catherine appeared with her supply list and stopped short, seeing them. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or hope. But she smoothed it away quickly. I'm going to run to Target for basics. Sheets, towels, toilet paper, kitchen stuff. You two want to come or stay here with the kids? We'll stay, Mason said. Someone needs to make sure they don't burn the place down. After Catherine left, Mason ordered pizza while Elena unpacked the box of dishes. The kids emerged from their fort, hungry and wild-eyed, and they all ate sitting on the living room floor because the kitchen table wasn't assembled yet. This is like camping, Sophie said through a mouthful of pepperoni. But inside. Indoor camping, young Liam agreed. We should make a fire. Absolutely not, Mason and Elena said in unison, then laughed. After dinner, they assembled furniture while the kids watched a movie on Mason's tablet. It was awkward and frustrating. The instructions were in Swedish or possibly gibberish, but eventually they got the table standing and the bed frames together. Mason was surprisingly bad at following directions, which made Elena feel better about her own confusion. I run a tech company, he muttered, staring at a pile of screws. I have people for this. Well, your people aren't here, so figure it out. Bossy. Practical. They got the beds made just as Catherine returned with enough supplies to stock a small store. Sheets, blankets, pillows, towels in colors Sophie had picked out online, kitchen essentials that Elena insisted she'd pay back over time. Catherine waved her off, but accepted an IOU that Elena wrote on a napkin and signed formally. By 9, Sophie was asleep in her new purpleless bedroom, and young Liam had crashed on the couch. Mason carried his son to the car, while Catherine gave Elena one last hug. "You're going to do great on Monday," Catherine whispered, "and if you need anything, anything at all, you call me, day or night. Thank you for everything." "Stop thanking me and start living, sweetheart. That's all the thanks I need." After they left, Elena walked through her apartment, her actual apartment, turning off lights, checking locks, making sure everything was real. In Sophie's room, her daughter slept curled around the polar bear from Christmas, her new sheets pulled up to her chin. The room smelled like clean laundry and new beginnings. Elena's own room was sparse, just a bed and a lamp Catherine had included, but it was hers. She lay down on sheets that didn't belong to a hotel, in a space that wasn't temporary, and let herself cry one more time. Relief, fear, gratitude, grief, all of it mixed together until she couldn't tell which emotion was which. Her phone buzzed. "Mason, you okay?" Elena, "Yeah, just overwhelmed." Mason, "Good overwhelmed or bad overwhelmed?" Elena, "Both, mostly good." Mason, "That's normal. First night anywhere new is weird. Call if you need anything." She almost did call just to hear another adult voice in the silence. Instead, she turned off the light and listened to the sounds of her apartment, the radiator clanking, the neighbor's TV through the wall, the familiar, unfamiliar noises of a building settling. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under. Monday morning came too fast. Elena woke at 5, couldn't fall back asleep, and spent an hour picking out an outfit that screamed professional competence. Sophie woke up excited, her first day at the on-site childcare at Reed Technologies, and chattered nonstop through breakfast about whether there'd be other kids and if they'd have good toys. Catherine picked them up at 7:30, insisted on driving them both for the first day. The childcare center was on the second floor of Reed Tech, bright and clean with teachers who seemed genuinely happy to meet Sophie. Elena filled out paperwork with shaking hands while Sophie explored the reading corner. "She'll be fine," the lead teacher, Michelle, young and kind, assured her. "We've got a great group of kids her age. She'll make friends in no time." Elena kissed Sophie goodbye 3 times, promised to check in at lunch, and forced herself to walk away, even as her daughter waved cheerfully. In the elevator heading up to 32, she tried to calm her racing heart. First day, new job, she could do this. Jennifer Torres met her in the lobby with a warm smile and a coffee. "Welcome to your first day. Ready to jump in?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The orientation was thorough. HR paperwork, benefits enrollment, office tour, introductions to what felt like 50 people whose names Elena immediately forgot. Her desk was in an open office area with 5 other coordinators, all women, all friendly in that professional way that could be genuine or performative. Elena couldn't tell yet. Marcus Webb, her supervisor, not her dead husband, stopped by around 10 with a stack of files. "These are your first 3 events. Board dinner next month, client visit from Japan in February, and a company retreat in March. Start with the board dinner. It's the smallest." Elena opened the first file, saw the budget, $15,000 for dinner for 20 people, and tried not to panic. "This is considered small? Wait until you see the retreat budget." Marcus's smile was wry. "You'll be fine. Jennifer says you have hotel experience, so you know how to wrangle vendors and manage logistics. This is just that with more money and pickier clients." He left her with the files and a login to the company's event management software. Elena spent the next 4 hours trying to figure out the system, reviewing past events for reference, and making preliminary notes about the board dinner. It was overwhelming, but in a good way, the kind of challenge that made her brain work instead of just surviving. Lunch came and she checked on Sophie, who was covered in paint and ecstatic about her new friend Emma. The same Emma from the tea party. Apparently their friendship had been fate. "She doesn't want to leave," Michelle said, amused. "I think you've got a regular on your hands." Elena returned to her desk feeling lighter. Sophie was happy. She was employed. They had an apartment. Things were actually, impossibly, working out. The afternoon brought her first crisis. The venue for the board dinner had double booked and was trying to back out. Elena spent 2 hours on the phone, negotiating and problem solving, and eventually securing a better venue for the same price. When she hung up, she found Jennifer standing at her desk. Heard you handled the Regency situation. They weren't being reasonable, so I found somewhere better. Good instincts. Jennifer perched on the edge of the desk. How's your first day going? Honestly, I'm terrified I'm going to screw something up. You will. Everyone does. The question is whether you fix it or fall apart. Jennifer's expression softened. For what it's worth, I think you're going to be great at this. You've got that thing, that ability to stay calm when everything's on fire. It's rare. Elena thought about the last 6 months, the car, the shelters, the constant low-level panic of not knowing where they'd sleep or what they'd eat. I've had practice staying calm during fires. I know. I read your file. Jennifer stood. That's why I hired you. Not because Mason asked, though he did, but because someone who's survived what you've survived and still shows up, that's the kind of person I want on my team. After Jennifer left, Elena sat at her desk feeling something unfamiliar, pride. She was good at this. She'd forgotten during all the chaos that she had skills, that she was more than just a struggling single mother, that she could be competent and professional and valuable. The rest of the week followed the same pattern. Early mornings with Sophie, long days coordinating events, late afternoons picking up her daughter who was always reluctant to leave. Elena fell into bed exhausted every night, but woke up with purpose every morning. It felt good. It felt normal. On Friday, Mason stopped by her desk at 4. How was week 1? Survived. Barely. That's the spirit. He handed her an envelope. Paycheck. Direct deposit starts next pay period, but Jennifer thought you might want this one in hand. Elena opened it, saw the amount, and felt tears sting. 2 weeks' pay. More money than she'd seen in months. Enough to start paying Catherine back, to buy groceries without counting pennies, to breathe. Thank you, she managed. You earned it. Mason's phone buzzed. I've got a meeting, but there's a thing tonight if you're interested. Jennifer's team does happy hour on Fridays. Low key, just drinks and decompression. You should come. I don't know. Sophie's invited too. We're doing it at Catherine's. The kids can play while the adults pretend to be social. He was already walking backward toward the elevator. 7 o'clock. Be there. He was gone before Elena could argue. At 7, she found herself on Catherine's doorstep with Sophie, who immediately ran inside when young Liam opened the door. The house was full of people. Jennifer, Marcus, Liam, Chen, a few other co-workers Elena recognized but couldn't name. Catherine had made enough food for an army. Elena? Jennifer waved her over. Come meet everyone properly, without the stress of orientation. The evening was easy in a way Elena hadn't expected. The team was tight-knit but welcoming, sharing war stories about difficult clients and disastrous events with the kind of dark humor that came from shared experience. Elena found herself laughing, contributing stories from her hotel days, feeling like she belonged. Mason stayed mostly quiet, nursing a beer and watching the group with something like satisfaction. At one point, he caught Elena's eye across the room and smiled, and she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude. No, she shut that down immediately. Mason was her boss's boss, her benefactor, the person who'd saved her when she had nothing. Feeling anything beyond friendship was inappropriate and stupid and asking for heartbreak. But when he came over later, sat beside her on Catherine's couch, while the kids ran wild in the backyard, that flutter came back. You did good this week, he said quietly. Jennifer's impressed. Jennifer's easy to impress. She's really not. Mason shifted to face her. I'm proud of you. I know that's weird to say, but I am. You could have given up 100 times, and you didn't. I had Sophie. Giving up wasn't an option. Still, you're stronger than you think. Elena looked at him, at the tired lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his hair at the temples, the way he held himself like he was carrying weight no one else could see. So are you. Something passed between them, unspoken but heavy with meaning. Mason looked away first. I should check on Liam, make sure he's not corrupting your daughter. Too late. She's definitely the corrupting influence. He laughed, and it sounded genuine, real, like he'd forgotten to be sad for a minute. The party wound down around 9. Parents collected children, said their goodbyes. left in a slow trickle until it was just Elena, Sophie, Mason, young Liam, and Catherine. The kids were asleep on the couch, tangled together like puppies. "I should get Sophie home," Elena said, but she didn't move. "Stay," Catherine suggested. "It's late, the roads are icy, and these two aren't waking up anytime soon. The guest room is still made up from last time." Elena should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, kept some distance. Instead, she said yes, because the truth was, she didn't want to go home to that empty apartment. Didn't want to be alone with her thoughts and her fears and the constant worry that everything would fall apart again. Catherine showed her upstairs, gave her pajamas that had belonged to Sarah, and left her in the guest room with Sophie already tucked into the big bed. Elena changed, crawled in beside her daughter, and lay there staring at the ceiling. A soft knock on the door. "It's Mason. Can I come in?" "Yeah." He opened the door, stayed in the hallway. "Just wanted to make sure you're okay. You got quiet at the end there." "I'm fine. Just tired." Liar. But his voice was gentle. "What's going on in your head?" Elena sat up, pulled her knees to her chest. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to all go away. The job, the apartment, all of it. It feels too good to last." Mason came in, sat on the edge of the bed. "It's not going anywhere. You're doing great at work. You're paying your rent. Sophie's thriving. This is your life now. You're allowed to keep it. What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess up?" "Then you'll fix it. Same as everyone else." He reached over, took her hand. "You need to stop expecting disaster, Elena. Sometimes good things happen, and they just stay good." "Did they for you?" The question hung in the air. Mason's grip on her hand tightened. "No, but I'm starting to think they might again." Elena looked at their linked hands, at the way his thumb traced absent circles on her wrist. It felt like standing on the edge of something dangerous and necessary. "Mason, I know, this is complicated. You work for my company, I helped you when you had nothing, there's a power imbalance the size of Texas." He met her eyes. "But I can't stop thinking about you. And I don't know what to do with that." Elena's heart hammered. "I don't either." "So what do we do?" "I don't know. Nothing, everything, I don't know." They sat in silence, hands still linked, the weight of possibility pressing down. Sophie stirred in her sleep, and they both pulled back instinctively, as if the moment required witnesses to be real. "I should go," Mason said, but he didn't move. "Probably." "Elena, don't. Not yet." She couldn't handle a confession or a rejection or whatever he was about to say. "Can we just not figure this out right now?" "Yeah, okay." Mason stood, released her hand slowly. "Good night." "Good night." After he left, Elena lay awake for hours, her hand still warm where he'd held it, her mind racing through every possible outcome. She couldn't do this, couldn't risk the stability she'd just found for feelings that might not even be real. Mason was grieving, she was grateful. Probably they were just two lonely people mistaking proximity for connection. But when she finally fell asleep, she dreamed about his hand in hers, and the dream felt like hope. The next morning, Catherine made breakfast while pointedly not mentioning whatever she'd noticed the night before. Mason was quiet, making pancakes for the kids and avoiding Elena's eyes. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt like a question neither of them knew how to answer. Elena left with Sophie after breakfast, thanking Catherine for the hospitality and the borrowed pajamas. Mason walked them to the car, helped buckle Sophie into her booster seat. "See you Monday?" he said. "Yeah, Monday." He closed the car door, stepped back, and Elena drove away, watching him get smaller in the rearview mirror. Beside her, Sophie chattered about the sleepover, about how much fun she'd had, about whether they could do it again soon. "Maybe," Elena said. "We'll see." But she knew they would. Knew she couldn't stay away from Mason and Catherine and the life they were offering even if she wanted to. Knew that Sophie and young Liam were already too attached to separate easily. Knew that somewhere between Christmas Eve and now, she'd stopped being alone. And that terrified her more than anything else. Because the last time she'd let herself depend on someone, he'd died and left her with nothing. Because Sophie was already calling Catherine grandma and treating young Liam like a brother. Because Mason looked at her like she was something precious, and Elena had forgotten how to be anything but broken. But maybe, broken pieces could fit together into something new, something different from what they'd lost, but good in its own way. She didn't know yet, couldn't know. All she could do was keep showing up, keep trying, keep letting these people care about her, even though every instinct screamed that it would end badly. Keep hoping that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. 3 months passed in a blur of work deadlines and school pickups and Friday nights at Catherine's that became routine. Elena coordinated events with increasing confidence, earned praise from Marcus and respect from her team, and deposited paychecks that still felt surreal. Sophie thrived at the child care center, made friends, brought home art projects that covered every surface of their small apartment. And Mason was everywhere and nowhere, a constant presence that Elena couldn't escape even when he wasn't in the room. They were careful, professional at the office, friendly at Catherine's, never quite alone long enough for the conversation from that night to resurface. But Elena felt it anyway. The weight of words unsaid, of hands that had touched once and wanted to again, of two people circling something neither of them knew how to name. It was driving her crazy. "You're staring at your phone again," Jennifer said one afternoon in late March, dropping files on Elena's desk. "Waiting for someone to text." "What? No." Elena set the phone down too quickly. "Just checking Sophie's schedule." Jennifer's smile was knowing. For what it's worth, he stares at his phone too, usually right after you leave a meeting. Elena's face burned. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." Jennifer perched on the desk. "Look, I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice. Mason's a good guy, maybe the best guy I know, and he's been alone for 3 years because he thinks he doesn't deserve to move on. If you're interested, and I think you are, someone's going to have to make the first move, because he won't. It's complicated. Everything worth having is complicated." Jennifer stood. "Just don't wait so long that you both miss out, okay? Life's too short for that." She left Elena staring at the files, heart pounding, mind racing through every reason this was a terrible idea. The power dynamic, the timing, the fact that they were both still grieving people they'd lost, the fact that Sophie was already attached and would be devastated if things went wrong. But Jennifer's words stuck. Life's too short. Marcus had taught her that, dying at 34 with so much left unsaid. Sarah had taught Mason the same thing, leaving him alone with a 7-year-old and regrets he'd never voiced. Maybe waiting for the perfect time was just another way of being afraid. That Friday, Catherine hosted dinner as usual. The kids disappeared immediately to play in the backyard despite the lingering cold. Mason helped his mother-in-law in the kitchen while Elena set the table, and the domesticity of it all felt like playing house, like pretending they were something they weren't, or maybe like practicing for something they could be. "Can I ask you something?" Catherine said during dinner, after the kids had eaten and run off again. "And I want you both to be honest." Mason and Elena exchanged glances across the table. "That sounds ominous," Mason said. "It's not. It's just, I've been watching you two dance around each other for months now, and I'm old enough to say what everyone's thinking." Catherine set down her wine glass. "Are you going to do something about this, or just keep suffering in silence?" "Catherine," Mason started. "Don't Catherine me. I see the way you look at her. I see the way she looks at you. Sarah would want you to be happy, Mason. And Elena, Marcus would want the same for you. So stop using your dead spouses as excuses and figure this out." The bluntness was so unexpected that Elena laughed, a startled, slightly hysterical sound. "Wow, okay, no holding back." "Oh, I'm 73 years old. I don't have time for holding back." Catherine looked between them. "I'm going to check on the kids. You two are going to sit here and have an actual conversation, and I'm not coming back until you do." She left, and the silence that followed was deafening. Mason spoke first. "I'm sorry. She's right," Elena finished. "She's right. We've been avoiding this." "Yeah." Mason pushed his plate away, leaned back in his chair. "I don't know how to do this, Elena. I haven't. Sarah was it for me. I thought I'd never want anyone else." "But you do?" "Yeah, I do." He met her eyes. "I want you. Have wanted you since that night at the hotel when we sat on the floor with the kids, and I realized I was laughing for the first time in years. But I don't know if that's real or if I'm just lonely. Don't know if you feel the same or if you're just grateful I helped you." Elena took a breath. I was grateful. At first. You saved us when we had nothing, and I'll never forget that. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being gratitude and started being something else. Something that terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because I lost Marcus, and it destroyed me. Because Sophie lost her father, and she's just now starting to feel safe again. Because if this goes wrong, we don't just lose you. We lose Catherine and young Liam and this whole life you've given us. The stakes are too high. Mason leaned forward. And if it goes right? I don't know. I can't imagine that far ahead. Then don't. Just imagine tomorrow. Imagine next week. Imagine taking this one day at a time and seeing where it goes. He reached across the table, palm up, an invitation. I'm not asking for forever, Elena. I'm just asking for a chance. Elena looked at his hand, work-roughened despite his wealth, steady, despite the tremor in his voice, and thought about all the reasons to say no. Thought about Marcus, about the guilt of moving on, about the risk of Sophie getting hurt. Then she thought about Jennifer's words. Life's too short. She took his hand. Okay, she said quietly. One day at a time. Mason's smile was tentative but real. Yeah? Yeah. But we need ground rules. We keep it slow. We don't tell the kids until we're sure. And if it doesn't work, we figure out how to stay in each other's lives because Sophie and Liam need that stability. Agreed. Anything else? You can't use your money to fix everything. No grand gestures, no expensive gifts. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. Mason squeezed her hand. I can work with that. Catherine returned 15 minutes later to find them still holding hands across the table, talking quietly about expectations and fears and what came next. She smiled, said nothing, and started clearing plates with the satisfied air of someone who'd successfully meddled. The kids came in, mud-covered and laughing, and Sophie stopped short seeing her mother and Mason holding hands. Are you guys married now? What? No. Elena pulled her hand back. We're friends. Friends hold hands. Sometimes, Mason said, when they like each other a lot. Young Liam considered this. I like Sophie a lot. Should we hold hands? Sure, Sophie said, and grabbed his hand with zero self-consciousness. The adults exchanged glances over their heads, trying not to laugh. Kids made everything simultaneously simpler and more complicated. That night, Mason walked Elena and Sophie to their car. Sophie climbed into her booster seat, already half asleep, while Elena stood by the driver's door. So, Mason said, this is happening. Apparently. Elena felt nervous and excited and terrified in equal measure. What do we do now? I was thinking dinner, just us. Tomorrow night if you can find a sitter. Catherine will watch Sophie. She's been angling for grandparent time. Good. Mason stepped closer, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth radiating off him. I'm going to kiss you goodnight, if that's okay. Elena's heart hammered. Yeah, okay. He kissed her softly, carefully, like she might break. It was nothing like kissing Marcus. Marcus had been all passion and urgency, while Mason was gentle and questioning, but it felt right in its own way, like coming home to a different house that fit just as well. When he pulled back, his eyes were uncertain. Okay? Yeah, more than okay. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Good night, Elena. Good night. She drove home in a daze, replaying the kiss, the conversation, the feeling of his hand in hers. In the back seat, Sophie hummed tunelessly, unaware that their lives had just shifted again. At home, Elena tucked her daughter into bed and sat on the edge of the mattress. Sophie, can I ask you something? Uh-huh. How would you feel if Mason and I spent more time together? Just the two of us sometimes? Sophie considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. Like dating? Yeah, like dating. Would he be my new daddy? Elena's throat tightened. No, baby. Nobody's replacing your daddy, but Mason could be someone else who cares about us, if you're okay with that. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, then said, I like Mason. He's nice, and Liam's fun, and Grandma Catherine makes good cookies. So you'd be okay with it? Yeah, but only if he keeps being nice. If he's mean, you have to break up with him. Deal. Elena kissed her forehead. You're pretty smart, you know that? I know, Sophie said matter-of-factly, and rolled over to sleep. The next night, Catherine arrived at 6 with a bag of entertainment supplies and a knowing smile. "You look beautiful." Elena looked down at her dress, simple navy, nothing fancy, but the first new clothing she'd bought with her own money in years. "It's not too much? It's perfect. Now go. Have fun. Don't worry about Sophie. We're going to have a grand time." Mason picked her up at 6:30, and Elena felt like a teenager on her first date. They went to a small Italian restaurant in Wicker Park. Nothing fancy, but warm and intimate, and spent 3 hours talking about everything and nothing. He told her about Sarah, how they met in college, how she'd been the brave one, how he still sometimes forgot she was gone. Elena told him about Marcus, the good and the bad, the fights about money, and the laughter in their tiny apartment, the way grief had carved her hollow. "Do you think they'd approve?" Elena asked over tiramisu they were sharing. "Sarah and Marcus. Of this." Mason considered. "Sarah would tell me to stop overthinking and just be happy. She was practical that way. Marcus would probably make a terrible joke and then tell me he wanted me to find someone good. He was sentimental under all the bravado." "Sounds like they'd get along." "Yeah, they would have." Elena set down her fork. "Is it weird that I feel guilty anyway?" "No. I feel it too, like we're betraying them by moving on." Mason reached across the table, took her hand. "But I think they'd both tell us we're idiots for waiting this long, that life is for the living, and grief doesn't mean we stop existing." "When did you get so wise?" "Therapy. Lots of therapy." He smiled. "Catherine made me go after Sarah died. Best money I ever spent, even if I hated every minute." They talked until the restaurant staff started stacking chairs, then walked along the lakefront despite the cold. Mason offered his jacket, and Elena accepted, swimming in it, breathing in the smell of his cologne. They didn't kiss again, not yet, but his arm around her shoulders felt like a promise. "I don't want this night to end," Mason said as they reached his car. "Me either, but I should get home to Sophie." "I know." He opened the passenger door for her. "Can I see you again? Outside of work and Catherine's?" "I'd like that." They drove back to her apartment in comfortable silence, and when he walked her to her door, he kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, with a hint of the urgency they'd both been suppressing. Elena felt herself melting into it, forgetting every reason this was complicated, just feeling wanted and alive and hopeful. Inside, Catherine had Sophie asleep on the couch, and a smug expression on her face. "Good date?" "The best," Elena admitted. "Thank you for watching her." "Anytime. Literally anytime." Catherine gathered her things. "He's good for you, you know, and you're good for him. I haven't seen him this happy since before Sarah got sick." After Catherine left, Elena carried Sophie to bed and lay there in the dark, thinking about second chances and the strange ways life could rebuild itself from rubble. She'd come to Chicago with nothing, desperate and broken, and somehow found a job and a home and people who cared. Found Mason, who understood loss in a way most people couldn't. Found Catherine, who'd stepped into the grandmother role like she'd been waiting for it. Found a family that looked nothing like what she'd lost but felt right anyway. The following weeks were a careful dance of new relationship energy and established routine. Mason took Elena on proper dates. Museums, concerts, dinners at restaurants that didn't require checking prices first. Elena made him laugh with stories from work disasters and taught him that not everything could be solved with money or power. They kept it quiet at first, but eventually people noticed. The way Mason found excuses to visit her floor, the way Elena lit up when he entered a room, the way they'd leave Catherine's house together and not return for hours. Jennifer cornered Elena in the break room 6 weeks in. "So, you and Mason?" "Yeah." Elena couldn't stop the smile. "Me and Mason? About damn time. The office pool was getting ridiculous." "There's an office pool?" "Honey, there's always an office pool." Jennifer grinned. "For the record, I won. Told everyone you'd crack by April. Easiest $100 I ever made." Despite the easy settling into routine, there were hard moments too. The first time Mason stayed over and Sophie woke to find him making breakfast in their kitchen, she'd cried for an hour about how it wasn't Daddy. The first time Elena had to cancel plans because Sophie was sick, and Mason seemed too understanding, like he was still just helping the charity case. The night Elena had a panic attack in Mason's car, convinced this was all temporary and would disappear like everything else good in her life. But they worked through it, talked through it. Mason learned when to push and when to give space. Elena learned to accept help without feeling like she owed something in return. Sophie and young Liam became inseparable, treating each other like the siblings neither of them had. Summer came, bringing heat and humidity and the 6-month mark of Elena's employment. Marcus called her into his office on a Friday afternoon, and Elena's stomach dropped, convinced she was being fired despite the stellar performance reviews. Instead, he offered her a promotion. Senior coordinator position just opened up. More responsibility, better pay, your own team. Jennifer and I both think you're ready. Elena stared at the offer letter, at the salary that seemed impossible. Are you sure? I've only been here 6 months. And in those 6 months, you've coordinated 15 events without a single major incident, brought in 2 new vendor contracts that saved us 30% on costs, and trained 3 new coordinators. You've earned this, Elena. It has nothing to do with Mason. That last part mattered. Elena had worried constantly that her relationship with Mason would undermine her professional credibility. But Marcus wouldn't lie. He was too blunt for that. Okay, she said. Yes, thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. That night, Mason took her and both kids to celebrate at a nice restaurant downtown. Sophie ordered the most expensive thing on the kids' menu with a confidence that made Elena laugh. Young Liam spilled juice on his shirt within 5 minutes. Mason handled both with the ease of practice, and Elena watched him interact with her daughter, patient, kind, genuinely interested in her rambling story about playground politics, and felt something shift. She loved him. The realization hit like a truck. She loved this man who'd bought her daughter pancakes and rebuilt their lives and learned to share space with her grief without trying to fix it. Loved him in a way that was different from how she'd loved Marcus, but no less real. The thought terrified her. Later, after they dropped the kids at Catherine's for a sleepover, she'd insisted, saying the adults deserved a night alone. Elena and Mason sat in his car outside her apartment. You got quiet after dinner, Mason said. What's going on? Just thinking. About? Elena took a breath. About how much has changed in 8 months. About how I came here with nothing and now I have everything. About how terrifying it is to be this happy, because I know how fast it can all disappear. Mason turned to face her. It's not going to disappear. You can't promise that. You're right. I can't. He took her hand. Bad things happen. People die. Life falls apart. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. Doesn't mean we refuse to be happy just because happiness might end. I love you, Elena said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I know it's too soon and probably too complicated, and I'm terrified of saying it, but I do. I love you. Mason's expression softened. It's not too soon, and I love you too. Have for weeks, but I was afraid you'd think I was moving too fast. We're both idiots. Clearly, he kissed her, and it felt like sealing a promise. Move in with me. Elena pulled back. What? Move in with me. You and Sophie. My house is too big, your apartment is too small, and we're together most nights anyway. The kids already treat each other like siblings. It makes sense. Mason, I know it's fast, I know there are complications, but I'm tired of doing this halfway. I want to wake up with you every morning, want to help Sophie with her homework and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes. Want to build something real with you instead of just dating around the edges of our lives. Elena's mind raced. The practical concerns, her lease, the logistics, what people would think, but underneath all that, a growing certainty that this was right, that the family she'd been trying to rebuild alone could be rebuilt together instead. Okay, she said. Yes, we'll move in. Mason's smile was incandescent. Yeah? Yeah. But we're telling the kids together, and if Sophie has any hesitation, we slow down. Deal. They told the kids the next morning at Catherine's. Sophie's face went through several expressions, surprise, consideration, excitement, before landing on suspicious. Will I have my own room? You and Liam would each have your own rooms, Mason said. Plus there's a playroom and a backyard with a swing set. A swing set? Sophie looked at young Liam. Did you know about the swing set? Yeah, but it's kind of old. We could fix it up, though. The kids went into immediate planning mode, discussing swing set improvements and room arrangements, and whether they'd be allowed to have a dog now. Elena and Mason exchanged glances over their heads. That went well, Catherine said from the kitchen doorway. "Though I expect this means fewer Friday dinners here." "Never," Mason said. "You're stuck with us." "Good. I'd hate to have to guilt trip you into visiting." They moved in over the course of 2 weeks, Elena's meager possessions swallowed up by Mason's 3-story house in Lincoln Park. Sophie decorated her new room in shades of purple with Catherine's help, while young Liam showed her every corner of the house like a tour guide. Elena felt like she was playing pretend, living in this mansion with a man she'd known less than a year, but it also felt inevitable, like this was where they'd been headed since that night in the Golden Lantern Diner. The adjustment wasn't seamless. Sophie had nightmares the first week, waking up disoriented and crying for her daddy. Elena had moments of panic, convinced she'd made a terrible mistake moving in so fast. Mason struggled with sharing his space after years of having it to himself. They fought about small things, how to load the dishwasher, bedtime routines, whether the kids needed more structure or more freedom. But they figured it out. Talked through the hard moments instead of letting resentment build. Went to couples therapy at Catherine's strong suggestion, learning to communicate better and navigate blended family dynamics. Slowly, the house started feeling like home instead of Mason's house that Elena was borrowing. 3 months after moving in, Mason sat her down on a Sunday morning while the kids were at Catherine's for brunch. "I want to talk about something, and I need you to hear me out before you panic." Elena's stomach dropped. "That's not a great opening." "I know, but just hear me out." He took her hand. "I want to marry you." "Mason, I'm not proposing, not yet. I know it's too soon, and we need more time, and Sophie needs to be part of that conversation. But I want you to know that's where I'm headed, that this isn't temporary for me. You and Sophie, you're my family now, and eventually when the time is right, I want to make that official." Elena felt tears sting. "I want that too. Eventually, but you're right. We need time. Sophie needs time." "I know. That's why I'm not proposing. I'm just stating my intentions, I guess." He smiled, making sure we're on the same page. "We are. Same page, same book, same library." They sat there in comfortable silence, the morning sun streaming through the windows, the sounds of the house settling around them. This was what Elena had been searching for without knowing it, not the money or the stability, though those helped, but this feeling of being part of something, of mattering to someone who saw all her broken pieces and chose her anyway. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said. "Do you think Sarah would approve? Of us, I mean, of you moving on?" Mason considered. "I think she'd be pissed it took me 3 years. She was always telling me not to waste time on regrets or what-ifs, to live while I was still alive." His voice went soft. "She would have liked you, would have appreciated the way you don't take my bullshit, how you fight for Sophie, how you made me remember how to laugh. Marcus would have liked you too, would have given you hell about being rich, but he would have respected how you showed up when we needed someone. Think they're watching from somewhere? Judging our life choices?" "I hope not. That would be awkward." They both laughed, and it felt like permission, from Sarah, from Marcus, from themselves, to keep building this new life without apologizing for moving forward. The proposal came 6 months later on a snowy evening in December. Mason had taken everyone back to the Golden Lantern Diner, the place where it all started, for what he claimed was just an anniversary dinner. The kids were in on it, barely containing their excitement, while Elena remained oblivious until Mason slid out of the booth and got down on one knee. "You changed my life in this diner exactly 1 year ago," he said, pulling out a ring. "Let me spend the rest of my life changing yours. Marry me, Elena. Let me be Sophie's dad officially. Let's make this family permanent." Elena was crying too hard to speak, but she managed to nod. Sophie launched herself at Mason with a shriek of joy, and young Liam joined in, and suddenly they were all tangled together in the middle of the diner while other customers applauded, and Doris, still working after all this time, brought out a cake she'd apparently prepared in advance. They married in the spring in Catherine's backyard, surrounded by close friends and family. Jennifer was Elena's maid of honor. Young Liam was Mason's best man. Sophie was the flower girl, wearing purple because she'd insisted, scattering petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. But the moment that broke everyone was when Mason knelt in front of Sophie during the ceremony, before he'd even kissed Elena, and asked, "Sophie Marie Hart, would you let me be your dad? Not to replace the father you had, but to be someone else who loves you and wants to protect you and help you grow up?" Sophie nodded, tears streaming down her 6-year-old face, and threw her arms around his neck. Yes, yes, I want you to be my dad. There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. The reception was simple. Catered food, a playlist instead of a DJ, decorations that Catherine had insisted on making herself. But it was perfect. Elena danced with Mason, with Sophie, with Catherine, feeling lighter than she had in years. This was her family now, the one she'd chosen and the one that had chosen her back. Late in the evening, after the kids had crashed in Catherine's living room and the last guests had left, Elena and Mason sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies blink in the darkness. "A year ago, I was alone in a diner on Christmas Eve," Mason said, feeling sorry for myself, convinced I'd never be happy again. "A year ago, I was counting change for pancakes and trying to figure out where we'd sleep." Elena leaned into his shoulder. Funny how fast things can change. Funny how the worst night can lead to the best thing. They sat in comfortable silence, the swing creaking gently, the sounds of the city distant and soft. Inside, their children slept peacefully. Around them, their family, chosen and earned, celebrated what they'd built from the wreckage of what they'd lost. Elena thought about Marcus sometimes still, in quiet moments. Wondered what he'd think of this life, of Mason, of Sophie calling another man dad. But she thought he'd understand. That grief didn't mean you stopped living. That loving someone new didn't erase the person you'd lost. That sometimes the greatest gift you could give to the dead was to keep going, keep trying, keep opening your heart even when it had been shattered. Mason still talked to Sarah sometimes too, she knew. Still wore his original wedding band on a chain around his neck. Still had her picture in his office. Elena had learned that moving on didn't mean forgetting. It just meant making room for new memories alongside the old ones. "What are you thinking about?" Mason asked. "About how far we've come. About how scared I was that night at the hotel. About how grateful I am that you didn't give up on us. I could say the same thing. You could have refused my help, could have walked away 100 times. Where would I have walked to?" Elena smiled. "You were offering everything I needed, safety, stability, hope. I was terrified of it, but I would have been an idiot to refuse. Still, you trusted me when you had no reason to. That took courage." They fell silent again, watching the fireflies, feeling the weight of the year settling over them. In the morning, they'd fly to Hawaii for their honeymoon, while Catherine watched both kids. Next week, they'd come home to their house, their family, their normal, chaotic life. Next month, Elena would lead her first major corporate retreat as senior coordinator. Next year, who knew what would come? But tonight, they sat together in the darkness, two people who'd lost everything and found each other in the wreckage. Two people who'd learned that family wasn't just what you were born into. It was what you built, piece by piece, from love and patience and the willingness to keep trying even when everything hurt. Elena thought about that moment in the diner, watching Mason pay for their meal without wanting credit. Thought about how a simple act of kindness had changed the trajectory of 2 lives. No, 4 lives. How $40 in a hotel room and a willingness to see someone who was suffering had created this. It hadn't been perfect. There'd been fights and setbacks, and moments when Elena was convinced it would all fall apart. Moments when Mason's grief overwhelmed him and he shut down. Moments when Sophie acted out, testing boundaries, making sure Mason wouldn't leave like Daddy had. Moments when the differences in their backgrounds created friction, Elena's instinct to save every penny clashing with Mason's casual spending, or her need for independence bumping against his desire to fix everything. But they'd worked through it, all of it, because they'd both learned the hard way that life was too short and too fragile to waste on pride or fear or the belief that you had to do everything alone. "I love you," Elena said into the darkness. "I love you too." Mason kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for buying us pancakes." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the backyard where they'd just gotten married, where their children slept inside, where their life together was just beginning. And in the end, maybe that was the point. That kindness mattered. That showing up for someone in their darkest moment could change everything. That the family you built was just as real as the family you lost. That second chances were possible if you were brave enough to reach for them. That love, in all its messy, complicated, imperfect forms, was always worth the risk. Mason and Elena would return to that diner every Christmas Eve for the rest of their lives, bringing Sophie and young Liam, and eventually the daughter they'd have together 2 years later. They'd sit in the same booth where Mason had first noticed Elena counting change, and they'd remember. They'd leave massive tips for Doris, who'd somehow never aged a day. They'd tell their kids the story of how they met, editing out the darker parts until they were old enough to understand. And every time, Elena would look across the table at the man who'd seen her at her lowest and chosen to help instead of look away. The man who'd become her husband, her partner, Sophie's father, the anchor that kept her steady when grief tried to pull her under. Every time, Mason would look back at the woman who'd reminded him how to feel, how to live, how to build something new from the ruins of what he'd lost. Every time, they'd hold hands across the table and silently thank whatever force of luck or fate or simple human decency had brought them together on that frozen Christmas Eve. Because sometimes, when you're at the end of your rope and the world feels impossibly dark, someone shows up with kindness, with pancakes and hotel rooms and job interviews and patience, with the willingness to see you as more than your circumstances, with the understanding that everyone's fighting battles others can't see. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that kindness becomes love, and that love becomes family, and that family becomes home. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and messy and beautiful in all the ways that matter. That was the gift Mason gave Elena that Christmas Eve. Not money or shelter, or even the job that followed, but hope. The belief that good things could still happen, that she deserved more than just survival, that her daughter deserved more than just getting by. And the gift Elena gave Mason in return was purpose, a reason to wake up feeling something other than grief, a reminder that his wealth and power meant nothing if he didn't use them to make someone's life better, a family to build with instead of a loss to mourn alone. They saved each other, these two broken people, not in some grand dramatic gesture, but in the quiet accumulation of small moments, shared meals and school pickups and fights about whose turn it was to do dishes, inside jokes and late-night conversations, and learning each other's grief triggers, building trust one day at a time until the foundation was solid enough to hold the weight of forever. That was what love looked like after loss. Not the passionate whirlwind of first love, but the steady accumulation of choosing each other again and again, of showing up even when it was hard, of making room for grief and joy to coexist, of understanding that moving forward didn't mean leaving anyone behind. Years later, when people asked how they met, Mason and Elena would smile and say they'd met in a diner on Christmas Eve. They'd leave out the desperation and the homelessness and the fear. They'd skip over the part where Elena almost said no to the hotel room, where Mason almost walked past without stopping, where everything hung on a moment of choice that could have gone either way. But they'd never forget it. Would never forget how fragile that moment was, how easily it could have been different. And they'd never stop being grateful that on one frozen night in Chicago, two strangers chose kindness, chose to see each other, chose to take a chance on something that felt impossible, and built a family from it. That was the story they told their children on Christmas Eve, sitting in that same worn booth at the Golden Lantern Diner, watching snow fall outside the window just like it had that first night. That was the legacy they hoped to leave. Not wealth or success or any grand achievement, but the simple truth that kindness matters. That seeing someone else's pain and choosing to help can change everything. That family is what you make it, not what you're born into. That even in your darkest moment, when you've lost everything and can't see a way forward, someone might show up with pancakes and hope. And that might be enough. It was enough for them. More than enough. It was everything.